Welcome to Previously on X-Men.
The podcast that looks back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. You can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Other shows on the network include Three Nice Things, where we force ourselves to say three nice things about a movie with a bad and often earned reputation. There's Is It Classic, Does It Rock, where we pick a band or artist and go through their discography album by album, track by track. Radio 64, Video Game Music Remix Radio, and 9021 Here We Go, a 90210 rewatch podcast. Share your thoughts on this and upcoming episodes by following us on Facebook or Twitter at Previously on X. Please rate, subscribe, and share the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. I'm Eric Mickles, known online as Dust vs. Tweak, and with me is my co-host,
Hilary Gunning. Did you forget your name for a second there?
You know, I didn't forget my name, so I thought I saw something flash off in the corner of my eye, so I briefly looked to see what was happening, and then I realized I was telling people my name. Today, we are talking about the 2014 film, X-Men Days of Future Past.
I'm so excited. I have been waiting for this.
Oh, really? Yeah. Now gone. This is movie 7, basically. I mean, it's X-Men 5, movie 7, 14 years in the making. That's how long this podcast has been going. 14 years.
And this is another, the whole podcast.
Uh-huh.
This is one that, like I've said before, these movies, every time they happen, it's like, I think that's the last one because they will never make another X-Men movie.
Uh-huh.
This one is one that I was definitely positive was never, ever, ever, ever going to happen because once they moved on to the first class cast, I was like, that's it. No more Patrick Stewart, but he's back.
He's back. He's going to be back a couple times.
Woohoo!
What did I want to say here? Oh, so I said this a little bit last episode, but I don't remember if I cut it out.
Okay.
This isn't my history with the movie, but I'm just going to let people know I saw X-Men, the first one, in the year 2000 when I was 14.
Can I do the song?
Yeah.
In the year 2000. Sorry, I just, every time I hear it, go on.
And then this movie came out 14 years later. And, like, normally that doesn't mean much, but, like, at the time, it kind of was like, wow, half my life. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was just, it was an existential moment that was happening to me that I guess when I say it to other people like Hilary, they think I sound ridiculous. But
you don't sound ridiculous. You just sound like a dweeb.
Okay, whatever. Well, X-Men 1 was very important, and it was kind of like a lot of things happened in my life in the year 2000. Oh, I was giving you a breather there. I was waiting for you the song.
I'm sorry, I
That's
lost
okay.
it.
A lot of stuff happened to me at that point. So, like, without the first X-Men movie,
in the year 2000, is that good?
Yes, the year 2000 would still have meant something to me. When this movie came out, it being this kind of like, we're going back to the old cast. It's, 14 years since the first movie, and it was just kind of like, wow.
You know what I want you to do?
Uh-huh.
For, like, the Twitter or something? I want you to put together an elaborate info chart.
Of where I am at all
like
times when the movies are coming
life
out.
To all of the X-Men movies.
All right, I could.
I know you could just do it. You could just sit down right now and do it from your head. Hey, listen.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the movie, how's this pandemic treating you?
It's great.
Really good?
Every day I wake up later and later, stretching my arms out because I haven't hung up the blinds, so the sunlight's also waking me up, and I'm just thinking like, good morning, day.
Yep.
It's great. And you know what's great? A lot of people are all like, oh, now we have so much time. And it's true, because this is podcast 3 of 4 that I'm recording this week. And somehow I hate doing it.
Oh, good. That's good,
so
Eric.
There's just this weird bitterness now about doing these podcasts and this thing. It's almost like it used to be something that I did on my off time and I enjoyed doing. But now that it's the only thing.
It's like your only job.
So, yeah. I'm not doing great. I go out for walks with the dogs.
That's good. That's healthy.
As somebody who self-isolated right after he dropped out of high school and bore witness to the toll that can take on somebody for a couple of months, I'm a bit worried.
Well, for my opinion, and I am very glad that you have the podcast to keep you grounded and not cycling into nonsense.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't have a small child.
That is helpful. Yeah. Having a small child does add a little bit of a little challenge to the whole process.
Yeah.
I always feel guilty because I don't have to worry about like food. I don't have to worry about losing my job because I'm freelance and all that kind of stuff. And so there's lots of people who are having a much, much worse time of it than me. But yeah, being stuck at home with my 5-year-old for weeks on end is a challenge.
Hilary, you said stuck instead of you get to.
I get to spend this quality time with my son.
Every day, 24/7 for
whom I love.
For the next however long it goes.
I woke up this morning and I was like, don't think about the month ahead. Just think about today.
Today, yeah.
Like a mantra.
How'd you feel when the movie started and Xavier was like, the future, a dark and desolated place?
I know. The very first shot is New York City.
Yeah.
It's post-apocalyptic thing. I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's like, so the future's dark and desolate, huh?
Let's all look into that future.
Oh, Days of Future Past, how quaint.
So I guess we're getting into the movie now.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, let's get into the movie. Let's talk about the time between 2011 and 2014. It should be
the golden age.
The golden age, yeah. It should be no surprise that Fox saw X-Men First Class as the beginning of a new trilogy for the X-Men series. Though I say no surprise, but also kind of annoying because we know that somebody in charge wanted the X-Men to be dead with their original trilogy.
Dead.
Remember we talked about how there had been word that like one of the producers didn't like the X-Men series, didn't like how much it cost and everything, and just wanted the series to be done. And so
I don't remember that, but I don't like that person.
They wanted a trilogy ender. And then here they are, they want another trilogy. Though these movies don't really become a trilogy, do they? They become a quadrilogy.
Yeah.
Or whatever it's called. It's not actually a quadrilogy. There's a term for it.
What is it? Is there? I'm going to look it up.
It starts with an S. It's like a septum or something.
No, that makes no sense.
An X-Men septum.
No, that's a nose.
Okay.
That's somebody's nose.
Oh, is it really?
Septum? Yeah.
You know what? Actually, that reminds me. Before we even talk about the making of this film, before we get here, here's one problem I have with this movie. Wolverine never pretends to smell anything.
Never.
Not once in this movie do we get that close-up Dutch angle of Wolverine's face and his nostrils flare. We go, oh, he must be able to smell. All right.
That is a major weakness. You're right.
All right. Were you looking up what do you call 4 films?
I am.
Uh-huh.
It just says quartet and it says quadrilogy.
Yeah, maybe it's quartet.
So I guess you're right.
Okay, so First Class director, because he directed the movie First Class, not because he's a first. He's not in that.
I thought you were qualifying him.
No, he is a pretty good director though. First Class director Matthew Vaughn told Total Film in 2011, First Class is similar to Batman Begins, where you have the fun of introducing the characters and getting to know them. But that takes time. But with the second one, you can just get on with it and have a rollicking good time. That's the main difference between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. So in 2011, Matthew Vaughn, while working on the first X-Men First Class, he's ready. He's ready to have fun with the sequel.
Nice.
Matthew Vaughn.
That's sort of similar to the second X-Men movie.
Yeah.
First set.
Vaughn was always planning on getting to Days of Future Past, but he wanted it to be the third movie in the trilogy, not the second. In 2019, ComingSoon.net asked Vaughn if he wished he could have directed Kingsman and his X trilogy. He responded, and Hilary, please don't get mad at like the studio and everything. Just save that. Save that.
What if I get mad at the studio and also save it?
All right, you will
later.
get mad. Here we go.
Cool.
So this is what Brian K. Vaughn, not Brian, that's a writer. This is what Matthew Vaughn has to say about why he left working on the X-Men trilogy. That's one of the reasons I didn't continue, because they didn't listen to me. My plan was First Class, then second film was new young Wolverine in the 70s to continue those characters, my version of the X-Men. So you'd really get to know all of them. And then my final was going to be Days of Future Past. That was going to be my number 3, where you bring them all. Because what's bigger than bringing McKellen?
Yeah, you know what? That makes... Sorry.
No, it's okay.
That makes sense. Like, what he's saying makes sense. Like, I love Days of Future Past, but it absolutely should have been a third movie. That would totally make sense. Because
what's bigger than bringing in McKellen and Michael and Stewart and James and bringing them all together? When I finished the Days of Future Past script, you're just... I'm like reading this quote, and you're just like, preach!
I am with him on this.
When I finished the Days of Future Past script with it ready to go, I looked at it and said, I really think it would be fun to cast Tom Hardy or someone as the young Wolverine, and then bring it all together at the end. Fox read Days of Future Past and went, oh, this is too good. We're doing it now. And I said, well, what do you do next? Trust me, you got nowhere to go. Then they Then they did Apocalypse.
Yes, Matthew Vaughn.
Then they did Apocalypse, and it's like, if you flip that round, even it would have been better. Hollywood doesn't understand pacing. Their executives are driving 100 miles per hour, looking in the rearview mirror, and not understanding why they crash.
Oh my gosh, I love Matthew Vaughn.
So in this case, he's saying even Apocalypse, which, you know, a lot of people don't think is a good movie at all, if you had made that the second film,
of people, huh?
it would have been better, even if that movie had been part 2 in Days of Future Past. And it's true, because as we'll learn with the box office with Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, audiences did not really care about the young prequel cast. They only want to show up for the original trilogy cast.
That's definitely true.
But at the same time, I think to give some credit to the executive, the producers in charge, X-Men First Class is a pretty low-ranking movie on the box office match. So I think some of them were thinking like, okay, we can make another X-Men movie, but how do we also make it make more money?
Yeah, that makes sense, but it seems very short-sighted.
Yes, it is short-sighted.
There's no building involved.
Right, yes. Anyway, Matthew Vaughn left the project in 2012 to work on Kingsman: The Secret Service. Since Bryan Singer had been involved with the X-Men films in producing roles between X-Men 2 and now, he stepped in to direct Days of Future Past. Simon Kinberg, a writer for X-Men: The Last Stand of all movies, returned to work on the script. It's funny how people can
there's a script for this movie. That's a change.
It's funny how people can kind of fail upwards in Hollywood, huh?
Yeah.
I look at some of Simon Kinberg's work and I'm like, all right, I think he's good with the things he's good at, and he's not good at the things he's not good at. Everybody makes bad work, but it is kind of funny that you can make X-Men: The Last Stand and people like, get that scriptwriter back. The movie we want to revitalize the franchise.
Well, I mean, it sounds like they just wanted to go back to the original trilogy, so it makes sense.
It's kind of surprising to me that they brought in Kinberg and not Hader, because Hader had worked with Singer, but I think Kinberg had been more involved with the franchise post X-Men 3 on.
Yeah.
Both Singer and Kinberg did research on time travel in films. Kinberg studied Back to the Future and Terminator, and Singer talked to James Cameron. And I had to look for this quote because I had remembered it coming out around like 2013 or something, but it wasn't easy to find online. It's from Empire Magazine. Bryan Singer told Empire Magazine, "We cracked it in a way that it makes sense. I had a 2-hour conversation with James Cameron about time travel. You have to create your rules and stick with them. That's why Terminator and Back to the Future work so well. And there are certain mechanisms in X-Men, certain powers that make this possible." Yeah, I think Days of Future Past does that too. I think it tells you the rules, it lays it out, and then it just sticks with them. And I don't think there's a lot of contradiction to how it works.
Yeah, I think it's pretty successful. Usually when there's time travel stuff, I'll very often be like, but I don't. And this one, nothing like stuck in my craw, so I feel okay about it.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of people had a lot of questions after Avengers Endgame. And I think partly it's because maybe they didn't have their definite their rules down. They weren't entirely sure if it was straight time travel, if it was multiverse and that kind of stuff. And so it left all these think pieces. Nobody's writing like, how does time travel work in Days of Future Past?
Yeah. Well, I think another part of it is they had their rules and they stuck to them. And also they didn't try to over-explain it. Yeah. I think that's another trap that time travel writers fall into, where they're like, okay, I'm going to make it make sense. I'm going to make it make sense. And they like talk about it. And so then it gives you things to question. Yeah. This was like, we're going back in time. We're going to fix it.
Yep.
That's what we're doing.
So Wolverine was chosen over Kitty Pryde from the comics and Bishop from the animated series to be the time traveler. Kinberg told Total Film, "We made this decision for a lot of reasons, some of them obvious and some of them more nuanced, to make it Wolverine."
Was one of them they just like Wolverine? They've always liked Wolverine and they only want Wolverine to do anything ever?
I don't know if they would say that's the obvious or the nuanced one. To make it Wolverine who goes back in time. One reason is that he's the protagonist of the franchise and probably the most beloved character to a mass audience. Probably the bigger reason is that when we started thinking about the logistical realities of Kitty's consciousness being sent back in time to her younger self as opposed to her physical body being sent back, it was impossible. The first reflex response to that was a character who doesn't age. Wolverine is the only character who would look the same in 1973 as he does in the future. They're saying it's impossible because the movie's set in the 70s, and so Kitty Pryde would be not born yet.
I see.
And that kind of thing, I'm like, well, then set it when she's born. But,
right, yeah.
But they're also
they're
using...
probably trying to map a little bit onto the comics.
Right, and they're using the first class cast still. So not that that seems to bother them later on in other films. Simon Kinberg also told the Q&A podcast, which I love that podcast, that Rachel Summers was originally the character to send Wolverine back.
That's in the comics.
Yes, Rachel Summers, who is the alternative future daughter of Cyclops and Jean. Rachel's cool. I like Rachel. It would have been cool to see, like, a bright redheaded Rachel with those, like, hound markings on her face.
So they really thought to do that for the movie?
Yeah, well,
that's interesting.
It was a passing thought. It was replaced by Kitty Pryde to streamline characters.
Yeah, that makes sense, but, like, that's a problem that I have with it. Mm-hmm. Just, like, a passing problem, because you just, like, you're like, that's dumb, and then you move on.
Yeah.
But, like, if you have someone with kind of an unmapped psychic power, then you can be like, okay, sure, sending consciousnesses, but this time it's Kitty.
A lot in that interview that I didn't mark down, it was him talking about if you put in Rachel Summers, you have to explain a lot to the audience who doesn't know her, how she's related to these two characters who are dead, how she has
I would
this
argue
power.
that you don't have to.
I know.
But yes, I understand.
I know.
Impulse.
I mean, we see characters cameo all the time. You could have just had her explain her powers, and people were like, okay. And then there would have been articles like for the rest of our lives saying top 20 things you didn't know about Days of Future Past.
Right, yeah.
Rachel Summers actually stems from the comics. But in terms of having Kitty Pryde be the one who sends him back, he said, who's to say that Kitty, who is capable of touching people and having them phase with her through space, why can't it be they also phase through time if she evolves her powers?
Because she has never done that before.
Right.
There's nothing to say she can't.
Also in that interview, he talked about how in X-Men comics, a lot of mutants have these secondary powers, sometimes that mutate even later after their first powers show up. And so that was his kind of origin for that thinking.
Yeah, like you can buy it as a thing, I guess. It's just weird. I do like that they had Kitty involved. Even if they weren't going to send her back, that is a nice way to have part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a bit also to appease like comic fans who are like, well, Kitty's the one who should go back, and it's like, well, now she's the one who's sending him back. I couldn't find these, and I think it's because Bryan Singer has deleted his Twitter since this movie. When this movie had been announced and Bryan Singer was announcing the cast, like we didn't know. We just knew it was going to be first class, and we didn't know who the new characters were going to be and who the returning characters were. And there were like all these release pictures throughout like a week, I remember, of like the names showing up on a whiteboard and welcomes this person in. And like I remember reading that with bated breath. I'm like, oh, who else is going to be in it? And seeing like Halle Berry coming back. I'm like, sweet. And then them saying like Bishop is going to be in. I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I think there was a part of me before we knew what was happening who thought because they cast Bishop, he was going to be the one who goes back in time, which I think I would have preferred. Like, the cartoon sends Bishop back, and it's fine. It's the 90s and whatnot. But I think sending this strong black character back to the 70s, you're probably going to have a little bit more interesting dynamics with the
true.
World.
Which could conceivably be part of the decision, because they don't seem to want to spend too much time on like figuring out things. They just want to like get the action going, and it would be a nice thing to happen. And I suspect that if they made Days of Future Past now, that would be a more serious conversation.
Yeah, definitely. There are two kind of famous changes to this movie. There's one that wasn't filmed. One of the big changes that we learned about afterwards was that the movie, Josh Hellman, he plays the young William Stryker. He had been originally cast as a young Juggernaut, and he was going to be the mutant who helps them break Magneto out of the Pentagon prison.
Oh.
So the way it's been described is the scene was going to drop Juggernaut out of a plane and have him just like crash right through to the prison. And then Wolverine was going to follow, break all his bones from falling from the plane, and then heal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But
so then you don't have that awesome scene.
Right. So they took out the role of Juggernaut, but they kept the actor in and put him in as young William Stryker. So that stuff was never filmed. The other big famous change is that Anna Paquin returned for the character of Rogue, and in the theatrical cut, you only see her at the end because they cut the role completely from the film to fix pacing issues. Certain scenes were reshot completely to work around that, while others were left on the cutting room floor. Until the release of the Rogue cut. And I think it was the same Q&A podcast with Simon Kinberg where he talked about that, how he loved all the Rogue stuff, but when he started cutting out the Rogue scenes, he was noticing it really wasn't affecting a lot of the other film.
Well, I've got things to say about that later.
John Ottman returned to score the film, as did his music from X-Men 2. So this is the first time a returning musical theme has happened in the X-Men movies.
Yeah, it's noticeable too.
Yeah. He also edits the films. The movie... Okay, I didn't write this down, but we should talk about it. At this time, all the toxic history about Bryan Singer was coming to light for around this. This is the movie where it was where we were finding information out.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, I don't remember if it was during the movie's production or afterwards. I know it was definitely the conversation around Apocalypse, but this is where the allegations of Bryan Singer start to come to light.
Okay.
The movie was released on May 23rd, 2014, Memorial Day weekend. With a budget... Okay, I'm throwing numbers at you now, Hilary.
Oh, here they come, and I'm going to understand them.
All right, with a budget around $220 million, which I think makes it the most expensive X-Men movie ever. And
that makes sense.
I read something that at the time, this was Fox's most expensive movie right behind Avatar.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, again, like with X-Men Last Stand, you have to imagine so much of that money is just the cast.
A lot of it's got to be cast. There's a lot of really good visuals, though,
well, yes,
too.
there is a lot of good special effects, especially in the future scenes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on a grand scale.
I imagine when you're casting the entire cast of the first 3 films, along with the entire cast of the prequel film.
All of whom have only gotten more well-known throughout the years.
Yeah, when you cast, when they had cast everybody for the first X-Men movie, they were character actors or actors who were known for maybe smaller roles, and then all of a sudden, Halle Berry's winning an Oscar, Ian McKellen is Gandalf, Hugh Jackman is becoming the biggest star ever. It's all that stuff.
Yeah, McAvoy and Jennifer Lawrence.
And Fassbender. I mean, I didn't know who Fassbender was then, but after First Class, he started showing up in a lot of genre films. Yeah, and they got Jennifer Lawrence like right after she won her Oscar for Winter's Bone, and then she just blew up with Hunger Games.
Yeah.
So, with a budget of around $220 million, it made $747 million worldwide, making it the 3rd highest grossing X-Men film. Really, though, it's the highest grossing X-Men film, period, as it's behind only the 2 Deadpool movies.
Oh, those don't count.
They count a little, according to thenumbers.com.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, that's not in a completely different audience, but it's a different audience.
Yes, yeah.
I would say.
If you take out the 2 Deadpool movies, then Days of Future Past is the highest grossing film, except domestically. Domestically, it's only like $1 million behind X-Men The Last Stand.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, worldwide, this thing was like, it blew up money-wise for the X franchise. It sent it to new heights. Its Rotten Tomatoes score at the time of recording is 90% for critics, 91% for audience. And I know
too shabby.
I say this about all the good X-Men movies. I swear that has gone down since release. I swear.
See, what you got to do from now on, you need to take like a screenshot of every movie.
I wish there was some way I could like prove that, but I remember when it came out, it was a thing. And you know what? Hold on. I didn't look this up, but I wanted to. So 2014 was a pretty good year for certain superhero movies because the year had started with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and for a lot of people, it ended with Guardians of the Galaxy. And so then you also have Days of Future Past. I feel like Days of Future Past is more tonally similar to Winter Soldier. Also, before we get into the films and everything, I have 2, what's the word? Retractions? Not retractions. I have to make amends for misinformation when we did First Class.
Yeah, that's retractions.
Okay, darn it all. We
will retract your previous statement about it not being retractions.
You had asked me at the time what James McAvoy had been known for.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, nothing really. When this had come out before First Class, people would have known him from Wanted, the movie Wanted, which also involved Matthew Vaughn. They would have known him from Atonement. They would have known him from The Chronicles of Narnia.
Narnia? Who was he in that?
He was Mr. Tumnus.
Oh, yeah.
So...
Okay.
Yeah, so he was... He wasn't this nobody actor that I kind of was like, I don't know what he was in.
Well, I mean, are those particularly...
No, I don't think people are like, oh, they cast Mr. Thomas as Xavier, sweet!
Yeah, right. So, like, he shows up, and he's not, like,
right.
a superstar.
But but with Wanted and Atonement, he had lead roles before. And then you had asked me what Michael Fassbender's, his origin, because of the accent he was kind of going for in First Class. I had just made up a whole bunch of stuff, I guess. I said Scottish is what it was, because he was in the Macbeth movie. No! I'm so sorry. He is Michael Fassbender.
Did you hear from his people?
No, I was worried about that. He's he's German-Irish. He was born in West Germany.
He was raised in Killarney.
Okay, so there you go. Look, this isn't like super important for these films, but I had gotten both these pieces of information incredibly wrong.
And now we have corrected them.
Yes. Normally we try to throw in like who's here for the new cast, but there's so many characters, especially in the future, we'll just talk about them as they show up on screen.
Good call.
Was there something else I got wrong about the Wolverine? Oh my gosh, when we talked the Wolverine, you know what I completely forgot to mention?
What?
Sunfire. You know Sunfire from the X-Men comics?
Yes.
He is like Muriko's like cousin in the comics.
Oh.
And so like he's the one member of that family who wasn't in the Wolverine.
Huh.
And it just dawned on me after we had done that, and I was like, I think I was reading a Rogue comic where he showed up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot this. So
that's funny.
For all these previouslys, I screwed everything up. I now
that should legit be like a segment that we do.
Previously on previously. I'm sorry. Hilary, you now will be in charge of the notes.
Okay, good.
You will be in charge of all this background info.
No, it's too much work.
Oh, it's fun work. You get to look back. You get to type in like you're doing an old college report. You have to change things around and cite your sources.
I'm glad that you are excited by it.
You cite your sources, Hilary. It's fun.
I'll format your sources.
Okay, thanks. Hilary, Memorial Weekend,
yes.
2014, May 23rd, 2014. When did you see Days of Future Past, the theatrical cut?
Oh, brother. I honestly don't remember. I'm going to assume if it was Memorial Day weekend that I saw it at the Charcoal Corral, which is our local drive-in theater.
Okay. When was your son born?
2014.
Okay, so was he born at this time, or like... Isn't there
so when did this come out?
This was May 23rd, 2014.
Oh, yeah. So that is the month that he was born. So, yes, we saw this in the theater.
Okay.
Like...
He was already born. This is May 23rd.
Because I know we saw it in theaters, because I remember, now that we have put this in context of my son being born, I definitely remember, because I was very excited about this movie coming out. And I was like, it's coming out in May, and I'm due in May, and I need to be able to see this movie. And so... we saw it in theaters.
You must have seen it at a much later date then.
Maybe not that far. I don't think it was that
You're saying like the week after you gave birth to a human being, you're like, get me in the theater.
Yeah, I kind of think so.
Okay.
I think we like left him with my mom.
Oh, wow. And then you saw Memorial Day weekend. All right, shortly after.
Well, it wasn't opening week. I'll have to ask my husband, and we'll do a previous.
I know, we should always have your husband on these, on the parts where I ask, when did Hilary see this movie? Yeah.
When did I see this movie?
You saw it on the 27th of June. It was 72 degrees out.
Yes, he will definitely remember. I like that you make him sound like a Poindexter kind of a guy.
I know. Yeah, that's more my thing right there. I guess that was Nick pretending to be me, pretending to be him. I don't like that impression.
That's not bad.
So, okay, well, you know that you did see this in theaters anyway.
Yes.
I saw this opening weekend. My mom and my sister had traveled down to Florida, to Jacksonville, Florida, to visit me and Kendra, and this was one of the things we went to do. I think maybe we actually went to see it like the day after they showed up. So yeah, I saw it. I was stoked for this film.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, you know how I feel like every episode I've been like, I was stoked for but I was
definitely true.
Super stoked for this film. Maybe not the same level as when I was a teenager with X-Men 2 and I could barely watch the trailer and sit still. But with this one, I remember seeing the trailer. They had released it while I was at work, and I was going on my lunch break, and all I had was my phone. So I just watched the first trailer on my phone, like while walking over to the Zaxby's I was going to for lunch. And I was like, whoa. And the first trailer was kind of low-key because the effects weren't done and everything. But they had the scene where Xavier's yelling, I don't want your future! And it was playing to the music that they took from The Thin Red Line. And it was just this big, operatic, swelling piece in the trailer. And Kendra, I can tell you, got very tired of both that trailer happening and me quoting it very loudly in the car.
Yeah, so I can see that happening.
I would play the music on my iPod, and it would get louder, and I'd turn it up, and she'd just be looking at me. I'm like, I don't want your suffering. I don't want your Ken, and she was just so sick of it. In fact, when that scene happened in this movie now, I turned to her and was like, do you remember when I used to quote that? She's like, yes.
I bet she does. I bet she does remember. Well, this movie was exciting for lots of reasons, because it's always exciting to have an X-Men movie, but this one was bringing in the old cast and the new cast that we had just like loved in the previous movie.
Right.
So I mean, we were amped up.
We're on a hot streak at the time. X-Men First Class and the Wolverine were good, and we were like the X-Men movies are good now. There's quality control of some sort, and it was kind of like, wow, we might get a good one. And I mean, and the fact that they were doing Days of Future Past felt like kind of a big thing. Like, wow, that's future stuff. That's time travel. And watching all the cast get announced, I was like, oh man. And like with the way the year had gone with like Winter Soldier and some of the other films that had come out, it was just like, oh man, I'm ready. And so I was very excited. And I watched it a bunch of times when it came out on DVD and Blu-ray and whatnot. I watched it. We showed it to a friend who hadn't seen it. I watched it at home one day by myself. I watched it a couple of times.
That's like old school Eric.
Yeah, I know. And I remember I ever watched the original version with you. When we moved back to Western New York, my wife and we all got together to watch the Road Cut for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so that would be, we would have watched it sometime in 2015 then, the Road Cut. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was when it was released, but it's when we watched it anyway, which was also kind of a big, exciting deal. And so, it was an exciting time. And you know what? We'll talk about this at the end of the movie, but I let my excitement for this film carry me through and expect all things to be fulfilled in the next film.
Yep, you did.
It happens, but we'll talk about that.
You poor fool.
I was bummed that Matthew Vaughn wasn't coming back because First Class was so cool, and this movie tonally has a lot more in common with X-Men 2 than X-Men First Class.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Let's get into the movie, Days of Future Past.
That's the movie.
That's the movie that we're watching.
That we're doing today.
The movie starts up, the Fox logo's there.
Yep, and the X-Lingers.
The X-Lingers, baby!
I was watching it for you. I was like... I heard the brum brum, and I was like, oh, I gotta watch. Yep. And it did it.
It does, and...
I suspected it might. I don't really know why. I felt like for this one, they would do it.
It stays, and the music that comes in as the X stays is the da-da-da-da, which is the theme from X-Men 2. So, just sitting there in theaters as it was, starting up, and the Fox logo does that with the X-Men 2 music, I was like, wait a second. Was that the X-Men theme from X-Men 2? So, I was very excited to see that, and I love it still. But then the future. We open on the future. A
nice and dismal future.
Oh, okay. 2 things before we really get into the movie. 1, we are going to spoil it, so get out. If you haven't seen Days of Future Past and you're listening to an X-Men podcast, I guess go watch X-Men Days of Future Past. For this podcast, I watched the theatrical cut, and Hilary watched the road cut. And so my notes are all for the theatrical cut, and Hilary will bring up the parts that changed. I did watch one of the scenes fully from road cut after the film was done. But Hilary, we'll talk about both cuts as we get to them.
Yeah, we've both seen both, but the most recent one is theatrical Eric, rogue me.
Yeah, I am a theatrical Eric.
You're so theatrical.
Oh, speaking of Rogue, real quick, Disney Plus, I tweeted this and shared it on our Twitter, but Disney Plus has added X-Men profile icons, so now I'm Rogue, but they still haven't put the episodes in order.
What the heck, Disney Plus?
Anyway. All right, so we open with the future in Xavier's monologue about the future. It's a dark and desolated place. The worst of humanity is left. Mutants and those who stood up for mutants and those who have the potential to have mutant children are all being corralled. We see these futuristic, glowy, purpley prisons. We see a dump truck.
It's very futuristic.
It's futuristic. It's bleak because it's basically bodies being dumped.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned whoever was looking at previous time travel things. I felt like this opening was very, very, very reminiscent of the future shots from Terminator.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't show a desolated future, I don't think, without harking back to the Terminator. So the Days of Future Past comic book came out 3 years before the first Terminator movie.
Yeah, there's not very much imagery in the comic that would be similar.
But yeah,
which makes sense.
Yeah, but it's definitely, you have the floating ships around with the giant spotlights.
Masses of corpses.
Yeah, and then you see a mutant digging through some rubble, finds the corpse of an X-Men and the belt. I don't know which X-Men. I tried real hard to figure it out. Is it the belt?
Because it felt like it was in the ground.
It was that chest armor.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
So
that kid, I felt looked like a Final Fantasy character.
He did, right? I actually, sometimes I was like, is this supposed to be Quicksilver? It seems like it should be somebody. But
yeah, I mean, it's a very distinctive, it could be that they're just trying to make it obvious that he's a mutant without him having to have powers. So they just make him look funny.
He kind of has like white hair with brown, and so it almost even alludes a bit to like Nate Summers, the Cable alternate character from the Age of Apocalypse. But no, that's the future. We see that kid gets wiped out real quick off screen.
Before we move on from that, the voiceover at that time, like while the scavenger's going around, is Xavier, and he says, "Destined to destroy ourselves like so many species before us."
Yeah.
And that I caught on that because I was like, so who now?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm like, which species?
Through their own hubris destroyed themselves.
Yeah, he must just be talking about, I mean, it has to be like Neanderthals he's referring to, right? Or something?
I think that it's just, I think it's sloppy writing with him trying to say we're going to become extinct like other creatures have become extinct.
Yeah, the great tiger-gorilla war. Why must we destroy the gorillas? Because they are different than us. Raw, we're tigers.
Anyway, that was just a thing that stuck with. Anyway.
It is kind of like, which species? You mean civilizations?
The dinosaurs had built something that brought
everybody knows it was
to them.
Right. It was hubris that killed the dinosaurs.
Yes, everyone knows that. Anyway, so that's over. We see that, and then we finally get our DNA sequence.
Yeah, though it's
our classic.
Yeah, there's some DNA
X-Men.
sequence. There's those the mechanical part. Listen, call me basic all you want. I could watch scenes like that, those opening title sequence, 5 times longer. You know,
you are so basic.
With that music that's playing and all that stuff, I'm just like, throw in more titles. It's fine. I know, like, the age of like the title sequence at the beginning of the movie is done, but I like the X-Men title sequence like that. And First Class didn't have one. The Wolverine didn't have one. I like da with all the things flying around. It's my lizard brain. I love it.
Yeah, I don't actually love the sequence itself, but I do like that they brought it back because it links it back to the first trilogy.
The first two, the third one. And yes, I was just, you have no idea how excited I was to hear that X-Men music return.
I can picture
for that opening sequence in theaters. I'm like, whoa, they did it. It's not just the X-Men series. I mean, the MCU has a horrible reputation of returning theme music. And so, like, I mean, but, like, it's something that, like, I feel like as an audience, those of us that notice, we latch onto it, and we want to see those musical cues return.
Oh, it's great. Well, I think that among the awful, awful things that the DC movies do, one thing that they did bring back, I felt like, was, like, with Wonder Woman having that recurring theme.
Yeah, her guitar riff.
That you could latch onto.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the first Thor movie, he has a theme, and they didn't use it for the second one. And then at the very end of Thor Ragnarok, they just they brought it back, and it was just like, oh, that's so cool. It's it's an Iron Man. The character has no theme to him.
Yeah, I feel like at the time that was like having a musical theme was viewed as old-fashioned. Like there was this period of time when they were like, we're not going to do that. That's
but it's
cheesy.
Crazy because we
and
love
now
it.
They're starting to remember that there's like a reason, like you can manipulate people's emotions by using music.
Like the original Spider-Man trilogy had a theme, and when they played it, you knew it was going to be this heroic Spider-Man moment. I think the MCU definitely picked up. I was shocked when they brought back the Avengers main theme for the second Avengers. Yeah. And then just to start using it in the trailers.
Yeah, the Avengers theme, I think, is the first time that they clearly were like, oh, right, let's do this. Let's do a theme.
So we're in Moscow at the opening future sequence.
Moscow with those awesome floating ships.
Yeah, I wonder if seeing Moscow is supposed to be a callback to First Class, because we saw Moscow a lot in First Class.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I wonder if it's like, remember?
It could be. I think it's more because later they end up in China. I think we're just supposed to see this as a global phenomenon rather than something really localized.
That makes sense.
The hover ships that have the new Sentinels in them, and I just think that image is so awesome. It's so just such a good, like, where this is the future. Right. This is like a totalitarian kind of a vibe, and you sort of hear like the muffled PA in the background, and everything is very like hunting people down creepiness.
Yep. So we open with an action sequence. We see the surviving X-Men in a Moscow kind of bunker, and the Sentinels are coming down from the sky.
See Blink and Warpath before.
Right. Yeah. We meet our new characters here. We meet Warpath, Blink, Sunspot, and Bishop are like the new Days of Future Past mutants. You got
and they've got some strong designs.
Yeah, well, let me say this, and then we can talk about that. We got Bing Bing Fan, who plays Blink, Aiden Canto, who plays Sunspot, Boo Boo Stewart, who plays Warpath, who I think before this, he was mostly known for Twilight New Moon as one of the werewolves. Omar Sy, who plays Bishop. Previously, before this, Omar Sy would have been in the Untouchables. Bing Bing Fan is like a huge Chinese actress and model, so she was kind of like a huge get for this film. In terms of when the film was going to be released in China.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Those are the New Mutants. And yeah, you're right. Those 4 mutants have some of the most like striking and comic booky feel of all the costuming we've seen in these films.
Yeah, they're striking and they fit the tone of that future so well. I don't know what they're doing with the colors of the atmosphere and stuff, but everything being dark and kind of purple almost. Those guys just really just like meld into that environment. They look so good.
Bishop's he's got those wires connected to his gun, connected into him, which isn't really how his power works. But you have Blink, who looks pretty comic accurate with her pink and her eye designs. It should be said, Blink is from the Age of Apocalypse storyline, not Days of Future Past.
But she's cool.
She's cool, and she's from a dystopian
future
thing. Yeah, so yeah, she's cool to see. And Warpath and Sunspot have kind of comic accurate designs, and so it's just kind of like, do that for everybody. Come on. Just do it.
Yeah. Well, now they're kind of locked into what they've already done.
And returning characters, we see Kitty Pryde with Ellen Page, Colossus, Daniel Cudmore, who I know played him in X-Men 2 and 3, so he's back. And then Shawn Ashmore as Iceman.
Yeah, who, by the way, I really like in this movie. I have never liked him as Iceman. He's always just this like schmoopy little kid. Yeah. But I really like him in this. I think he really fills the more intense role.
Okay, Shawn Ashmore told The Wrap that in the first X-Men movie, I had to make a rose for Rogue, but that was the extent of the character. So it's cool to see over these 4 movies going from that to X2, where you sort of see him do an ice wall, and in X3, he finally gets to battle, and in Days of Future Past, we're soldiers.
Yeah,
so
he steps up to that, and I think all of the power usage and all of the teamwork is really well done throughout the whole movie.
We get to see
you particularly see it in this scene. You get to see how they use not just using teamwork, but using their powers in creative ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something that we didn't really see at all in X-Men The Last Stand during that big mutant battle, because it was really just people punching each other, and it was nobody's. And in First Class, we get to see it a little bit more because now they're working together, but that's their like first mission and everything. So this is where we get to see like people who have been doing this for a while, who are experienced with their powers and working with each other. The way like Blink is teleporting people or teleporting their powers in different directions, and we get to see Bobby use an ice slide.
Yeah, Bobby is really great, and I think having Blink is probably the biggest impact on the visuals, because she interacts with all of the other characters and has that bright, colorful, moving them around all over the place.
Well, it's kind of like a play on like the teleportation power that impressed so much in X-Men 2. Now we get to see it in this like more visually dynamic way. Post Portal games, there's that as well.
Do you think that impacted it? I bet it did.
Maybe. It is just such like a cool design and striking design that kind of harkens back to the first time we saw Mystique, the first time we saw Lady Deathstrike's claws. You know, this because Blink I don't think has any lines. But she's so striking, and her powers are so cool, and the way she kind of moves around like a dancer, it's such a memorable character, I think. I like Blink in the comics.
She's the one that I always think looks like Sinister.
She's not. She's pink.
I know that, but I always think it. Well, she's got that thing on her head. She looks just like him. Anyway, I was just gonna say, you wonder if Blink in the movies has, beyond just the ability to make portals, if she has some like spatial something, because the complexity of her making the portals and like getting them to shoot each other and like everything in rapid fire is really pretty out there.
The powers work differently in the movies than in the comics. I think it's been increased visually for the movies. Days of Future Past, like they say 50 years difference between 1973 and Days of Future Past, which I don't think totally works out, because X-Men 1 says in the not too distant future, or, you know, almost tomorrow, whatever it says. That means this movie's supposed to be happening like in the 20s. I feel like the X-Men's own timeline puts it ahead, especially with the gray in Wolverine's hair. It feels like, unless he started aging rapidly because of the stress,
I mean, it could be. It's a
yeah.
hideous world.
Yeah, I'm not sure if 50 years is totally the right, but we'll just go with it. But anyways, that means at the end of the movie, when we see the timeline made better and everything, Blink and Warpath and Bishop and everything, technically they're still out there, just in completely different situations.
Yeah.
So there's a big action sequence which we talked about where they're fighting off against the Sentinels, but we learned pretty quickly that the Sentinels, these Sentinels, can wipe the X-Men out pretty easily.
Yeah, well, they have this adapting power. Like
we
see them fighting for a while, and then all of a sudden we sort of get the realization that whatever the X-Men are doing, they'll do the opposite.
Yeah, they can replicate powers, and some of them we see callbacks to other mutants. Like one of them does Lady Deathstrike claws.
One that turns to Diamond.
Yeah, like Emma. And so like you see that, and they have numbers on their side, and so the X-Men, they pretty much all get killed. We see Bobby's head get crushed.
Yeah, the whole sequence is you're following them basically as Kitty and Bishop run to a specific location, to like a bunker or something, and the rest of them are just throwing themselves.
Yeah, they're biding
the Sentinels.
Time. Yep.
And they just get wiped out one by one. So you're seeing like mainstream. You're seeing Bobby. You're seeing who else? There's several people that just.
It's Colossus. It's Colossus. It's Iceman. It's those 4 new ones: Bishop, Blink, Warpath, and Sunspot. They all get wiped out
right out of the gate. You just see them all.
One of the Sentinels stabs Blink through one of her portals.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's when we learned that Kitty Pryde is actually, they're all biding time so Kitty can send Bishop back in time. The older X-Men show up. It looks like they were trying to find them in the first place, and she explains that they've been doing this pattern where they hunker down, the Sentinels find them, they send Bishop back in time, he warns them, and then they move before the Sentinels were ever there. So they've been just living this kind of almost non-existent lifestyle. The X-Men join, and so you got Xavier, who's in a hover chair. Our first hover chair.
Yeah, and they're in a jet, right? They start out in a jet, and you see Cerebro, and you see, it's sad because you see all of the mutant lights that you usually see, but this time they're all like blinking out and screaming.
There's no lights left. There's so few of them left. But yeah, Xavier's there with his hover chair. We see Wolverine and Storm, and then gasp! Magneto.
Yeah, Magneto comes out right behind him.
He's alive, and he's working with the X-Men again.
I like this moment with when the like Storm and Wolverine and them first meet this new group, because they come across, I think it's Bishop first, and everyone's very suspicious.
Right.
But then Bobby comes out. He has the history with them and is like, they're cool. And then also Kitty after that. Right. And I think that's a nice introduction.
I mean, these are mutants who probably, like the new ones we meet, they probably haven't known anything but this life.
Right.
As opposed to the X-Men who, have been doing it.
Yeah.
Wolverine has some gray hair, so he
looks cool. I like his look. He's very sleek.
Oh, this is the movie where I think Hugh Jackman finally said he achieved the physical look that he wanted to look for the movies. But I think
I thought about that when I was looking at it, because you had mentioned that before, and like the dehydrating to get all like gross. Yeah, because that's how you get that
veiny look.
Because he definitely had that.
So disgusting. Don't do that to yourself. I mean, yeah, you look jacked, but also...
It's like, eat healthy.
And he's dressed. After the scene where you see all how jacked he is, he's dressed the entire time, so who does it benefit? You're in 70s clothes the whole film. So for like 5 minutes, you tortured your body and deprived it of sweet nutrients. It's just, we learn about Kitty's new power. She's able to teleport, she's able to phase consciousness to their own body in time.
In the past.
So it's not sending somebody back in time, it's sending their mind back in time to their own body. There's a lot of, you ready for this, Hilary?
I'm ready.
There's a lot of exposition. Exposition. I wrote it with an X.
Congratulations, Eric. That's beautiful.
Thank you. There is a lot of exposition about how time travel works, about why they would send them back to the 70s, because they all know about the secret history of the Sentinels in this future. Telling how originally in the 70s, Mystique killed Trask, and that started a Sentinel program secretly that 50 years later created the Days of Future Past universe.
And this is one of those things that you just accept, and I did in the movie.
Right.
But when you think about it, like... how do you pick the one thing that you would change in the past to affect the things that are happening right now?
Yeah.
That is so complicated. And like, obviously you cannot do that in a movie, but it's just so interesting that this is the thing. We change this.
The thing they argue in this one is that when she kills Trask, they captured Mystique. and tortured her and experimented on her. And it's her powers that allow the Sentinels to replicate other mutants' powers.
Oh,
so
yes. So they need to keep her out of their hands.
If they basically, if they can stop her at this moment, they can stop the Sentinels from having these powers.
So maybe it's like this is a time when they know where she is.
Yeah, I wonder. You're probably not wrong about that, because like if you go back further where you know where she is, which is First Class era, that's probably too long and too far. But yeah, and any time afterwards is too late. So
yeah,
it's kind of like Back to the Future, where like they know exactly where lightning is going to strike.
Right. Yeah, because they've had that clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the constant scenes in Days of Future Past where Wolverine's like, when that clock strikes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's neater than I thought it was.
Yeah, but you're right with like all time travel movies like that. It's kind of like, well, okay, you sent a Terminator to go back in time and kill John Connor. Why did you wait till he was 14?
Right, exactly. While we're talking about Mystique,
uh-huh.
I thought it was just really fascinating to watch Patrick Stewart
talk about
Mystique from the First Class movie.
Yeah, he was like a sister to me.
Yeah, because you've never heard him talk about that before, and it's such a critical element of his character in the First Class.
Yeah,
and so I think it's just such a nice moment to unify the character,
right?
So you don't have to see two separate Xaviers.
Right.
You just like really lock in that this is future McAvoy.
I mean, we never saw Mystique and Xavier in the same scene in X-Men 1 or 2 or 3. Like, they just were never on camera together. There was never any interactions with them to contradict that. And you have to imagine that, like, if this is like the real history because what we're seeing until everything has changed is the real history that leads to the first 3 X-Men movies, then in the time that Mystique was captured and killed, she had already killed somebody, and she became more bitter and angry, and she had been tortured. So, like, you can believe then Mystique would go into the mansion in the first movie and mess with Cerebro in a way that's going to at least knock Xavier out.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I was going to say, I guess they are in a scene together in X-Men 2 when Magneto leaves Xavier to die in the evil Cerebro. But she doesn't really say anything about it. She's just watching Magneto say goodbye to Xavier and change everything around. But I mean, again,
you can almost
at this point, she's like ready to also say goodbye. She's, lived a lot. And in this universe, then it's been 50 years since Mystique even interacted with Xavier.
Right. And you could see, like, if she really has been tortured and whatever, like dissected at this point, it makes sense that she could be kind of divorced from her previous existence.
But yeah, I thought of that too, that this is our first and only interaction with Patrick Stewart referring to Mystique as his sister, as he knew her ever since she was a little girl.
Yeah, and I like too that his first impulse is that he will be the one who has to go back in time because he has to be the one to talk to Mystique because that's so him from the First Class movies.
Yeah, it is. I think I would have liked a scene, because that's how I am and I don't understand movies. It would or a scene of like Rebecca Romijn Mystique interacting with P. Stu with that knowledge. But
yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't think that would work in the movie, but it is something that's noticeable that you don't get.
Yeah, because this is how the movies open. We haven't gone back in time, so we haven't seen the prequel cast yet. We haven't been in the 70s yet, so it's almost kind of like, well, can we just stay here in the future?
I know.
With these,
so good.
with the X-Men from the original movies with these new characters who look so cool. Can we just stay here? And it takes me a while, but eventually I'm like, oh wait, I'm totally invested in the 70s stuff now. But it's just
they get you there.
It's so different. You know what I mean? This Days of Future Past setting is so different for the X-Men movies. They kind of hinted at it with Last Stand with their Danger Room session and Wolverine like decapitating that Sentinel head. Yeah, it's just like, boy, this is unique for this. And the MCU hadn't really done that stuff yet. It was cool. It was
very cool.
But we must travel into the past.
And of course it has to be Wolverine, and they decide that it's because of his healing factor because that's the answer for everything.
As Kitty says, the mind can only take so much. It's going to snap if you send it back too far. And Wolverine's like, well, my mind will heal. It's been doing it forever.
Which I would argue is an argument for having Xavier do it, because it's the mind, not the body. It's not the brain.
Yeah.
It's the mind.
It's the mind.
But anyway, setting that aside, it's fine.
I should say, Halle Berry is not in this movie as much as she was supposed to be. She said in an interview that she was pregnant at the time, a surprise pregnancy. And so you notice that a lot of her shots of her are stomach upwards. You don't see anything of the stomach area of her except really her death scenes and one floating scene. So yeah, she is not in this movie as much as she was going to. Now, I can't remember there was supposed to be romance between her and Wolverine in the future scenes before he goes back in time. Was that in the road cut?
Oh boy, I don't remember. I don't think so.
You just watched it.
No, I know, but I wasn't watching for that. Well, I mean, all of the scenes with Storm are pretty brief.
Right. Okay.
So it's possible, now that I'm thinking about it, it's possible that there was a scene where he's like saying goodbye or something.
Yeah, he's saying goodbye and saying like, things aren't going to be the same, and so that her and him aren't going to be together anymore.
Yeah, that does seem
okay.
Like maybe a thing. I think maybe I just interpreted it as like we've been friends forever.
Well, in Days of Future Past, in this future, Storm and Wolverine are supposed to be a couple. I think they wrote out some of the romance. I think there was a kiss. Really maybe they cut out the kiss. I don't know.
There's no kiss. There's definitely no kiss. But the more I'm talking about it, the more I think that maybe there actually is something with the two of them.
Okay. Yeah. That's the romance that like a lot of stuff goes back to. It will show up in the cartoon when Wolverine and Storm are also in the future in their Age of Apocalypse thing. I like it. I like the two of them together. It was like that in the comics for a while ago. And I was like, you know what? I like this. It's good.
Yeah.
She knows how to shut him up.
It's too bad that they couldn't use Storm more because when you do see her, she does sort of step up to that like leader role that she has. Like she has that in the comics. Well, but you notice that vibe when she's in the group scenes. But then you don't get very much of her.
Well, when she's using her power, everybody just kind of like looks at her like, oh, that's Storm. Kind of seems like the new younger mutants who were skeptical are like, oh, wait, right, Storm. She's cool.
Right. Yeah. She's legit.
We go back in time. Wolverine wakes up next to a lady on a waterbed with the lava lamp. We're in the 70s.
I mean, it's pretty classic.
Yeah.
They really go for it. I'm surprised that they didn't have him spring a leak in the waterbed.
He does when he pops his claws the first time.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, when he's fighting the goons who walk in. Oh, he's
fighting. Okay.
He pops his claw and it hits the waterbed. Yeah, whatever happened to waterbeds? I knew people who had waterbeds growing up.
I did too. I couldn't imagine them being comfortable, honestly.
We see Hugh Jackman's butt.
Oh, yep. We see full.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2014, body. Baby. The X-Men movies are grown up now. We see butts.
I feel like after all of the work he did on his body, he was probably like, we're going to have a shot of my butt, all right?
Yeah, that was in his contract. Yeah, I've dehydrated for this scene. My butt is perfectly dehydrated. Yeah, I don't know if I should share this on the podcast, but my mom will text me after seeing an X-Men movie like, ooh, is that Hugh Jackman's butt? And I'm like, Mom, stop! Because she loves him. She loves him. Anyway.
Oh, that's hilarious. And then we get a classic Wolverine fight scene.
Yeah, he pops his claws. He's surprised because he's got bone claws. He has that moment where he's like, oh, yeah. Oh, we didn't even talk about this. In the Wolverine, his claws are cut off, if you remember. In the Wolverine.
I do remember.
The Silver Samurai cut off his claws, and then he had bone claws left. And he still had them in the end credits sequence where Xavier and Magneto come to recruit him. And yet, in the future, he's got metal claws. Even though he doesn't ever fight in the movie, so he doesn't need the metal claws. I remember Singer saying in an interview that Magneto can manipulate the metal, so he probably just put them back on. And it's just like, well, okay, but you didn't say anything about that. And there's no real point. It's just maybe people didn't see the Wolverine, so now you're just making him have metal claws. It's just these small continuity things that are so fixable.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway,
I hadn't thought about that one.
He's got his bone claws, but he's got his bone claws at the wrong time. Not in terms of like continuity, but like he needs his metal claws for this time to fight. We'll get on that.
It doesn't slow him down.
No, it doesn't. He takes out those other guys pretty quickly. He gets the keys. I like that that funky groovy tune that's playing when he walks into that street, that Chickawa. Yeah, no,
it's the 70s, baby.
I know. Part of me also wants a little bit more of that like Wah Chickawa soundtrack in the movie as they're doing stuff. But
it's true. They don't gimmick it up a little.
We cut to a Senate scene.
Well, I was going to say just very briefly, I think the scene with the fight in the hotel room, I think is extended in the rope cut. I think there's a little bit more with him fighting, and I think that's more of a censorship thing because I think it's a little more gruesome in the rope cut.
They call him Jimmy. in this scene.
They do.
Because his name is James Howlett, and he would have known that in the 70s still.
Yeah, I like that because it's a very gangster kind of a name.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, her being like, Jimmy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's just nice.
He's, because if we remember, Origins is like in the 80s, so he should still have his bone claws, he should still have his memory, so all that tracks.
Continuity police.
So
when he leaves, I think there's another thing that's different. Yeah, there's a scene where he leaves and he has the keys, from the guy.
No, yeah, the regular cut just has him walk down the street and cut.
Oh, yeah, the whole scene. He gets in the car and the lady is in there and she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And he says, "You're gonna have to lay low for a while, starting now," and like kicks her out of the car, and then that's just sort of it. Then there's some attitude from him driving away. Mm-hmm. But I like that one just because I like any little moment that you have that deals with the logistics of him being a different person in the past. So I like him having to deal with that. Yeah. Just briefly with his previous commitments. I think it's a nice touch.
Where should this war? So this is the end of the Vietnam War. But we know that Sabretooth and Wolverine were in Vietnam. And we know that Stryker recruited him in Vietnam, even though they're not the same age. So I guess we should assume...
Maybe he came... Because they're sending soldiers home.
Right.
So maybe he has come home in like a first wave or something. And just got a brief job.
Right.
As like muscle for some mobster.
Right. So this could be before his first mission with Team X, or it could be after he left Team X.
Could be, but it's like right. It's like right at the end of the.
Yeah.
They're just signing the peace accords.
It doesn't totally track.
We can make it work. He doesn't have to have been living this life. It's just this moment.
We cut to the it's not a Senate, but a conference.
It's a hearing of some kind.
Yeah. Bolivar Trask is trying to convince them to approve his Sentinels. Bolivar Trask is played by Peter Dinklage.
He does a great job in this.
Singer, I believe, cast him because of his work on Game of Thrones at the time. Yeah, he's very good in this role. He's kind of got this I'm smarter than you attitude with like everyone he deals with.
But he's also, I find him to be more subtle than you might expect from a character like this. I think that he just like plays it like a guy who thinks he knows what's right.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he doesn't seem diabolical in any way.
Yeah. In this hearing, you have Len Wein is playing one of the hearing people who are hearing things.
They're probably senators.
Yeah, and also Chris Claremont is there as well.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Claremont's the one who's like, we have real enemies out there. That's Chris Claremont.
Very cool.
So don't forget, Bolivar Trask was also in... X-Men: The Last Stand. He was working in the White House.
Well, maybe it's a different Trask. Trask is a very common name.
All right, so that's the Senate. They're not going to, because they're like, these are American citizens. They're living peacefully. We haven't had an incident in forever. We're not going to buy your Sentinels. For me anyway, Wait. What?
There are a couple things from the Rogue cut in the scene, the first scene from Days of Future Past that I didn't mention.
Oh, okay.
When they're talking. So we might want to cut
No, it's fine. Let's do this. Yeah, it's time travel. Who cares? Cast your mind back into the future.
First, when I keep wanting to say Picard. When Xavier and them land and they're talking about sending Wolverine back. Mm-hmm. There's a discussion added in about it being Wolverine, and like there's just more conversation about it, and there's a thing where they're like, so you just want us to just like risk our lives for a future that won't involve us in any way? Mm-hmm. And Magneto just says yes. Yeah. Very frankly. Yeah. And then there's just a lot more discussion, I think, in the Rogue cut, which is nice because I like any amount of logistics and people thinking about things. And then there's a scene with Kitty and Iceman where they just are kind of tucked away, and Iceman's like, "Are you sure you can do this?" And they share a kiss. Yeah. And he says something about, boy, I can't remember exactly what he says, but the implication is that they're in love, and once they fix the future, that might not even happen. Right. And so he's sort of like, I guess we're just done now, goodbye kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Which is just another nice character touch that is missing from.
It's one of those, like, this future's so bad I'd rather never have lived it in the first place kind of arguments.
Yeah, but then there's still things that you'll miss.
Yeah.
And like the idea that you're basically like the person that you are right now
is gonna die. Is gonna be gone.
Die. Yeah. You yourself are not going to see the benefits of what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're just not going to exist.
You're making a sacrifice there. I mean, it's most dialogue they give to the New Mutant characters too. So
yeah.
So we cut to Vietnam.
Soldiers in Vietnam.
Stryker is planning to take the mutants to Trask Industries to be experimented on. Havoc's there. Toad is there. Ink is there. I think Ink is the one with that like eye tattoo that's kind of Phoenixy. I think we saw him in the future scene.
Oh, okay.
Being
Could be.
In one of the camps being processed. And so we have a young Stryker who I said is played by Josh Hellman. Young Stryker, he's fine in this role, I guess. I probably like him a little better than I like Danny Houston in his stupid face.
Danny Houston is fine.
All right. Well, how do you like this young gun?
I think he's fine. I think visually he's, close enough to make sense. He's a little tall, but anyway. I think it's fine that he's not really a big player yet.
Yeah.
Just having him be a follower for a little bit is fine at this stage.
Freaking love Stryker now.
They do.
Movies.
It's true.
And for me, like I like Stryker and X-Men 2 and I love X-Men 2, but we can move past Stryker. I don't need him to show up again in Apocalypse, but I know.
I think it goes along with their obsession with Wolverine.
Yeah, sure.
They just want to like latch right on.
Yeah. So yeah, young Stryker's going to take him away, but guess what? Mystique is there to rescue them, and she takes out kind of the whole room. Some of the other mutants help, and I just couldn't help but think, like, well, technically, Havoc could just lay waste to not just this tent, but this whole base, if he really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And instead, he just gets, like, one blast off.
At this point, he doesn't necessarily know what's going on. Like, he's a soldier. He's following orders.
And Mystique has been rogue for, like, 10 years.
Yeah, so presumably she knows that they're being taken to be experimented on. He doesn't know that. He just knows that they've been sent somewhere.
Right. It seems like they hate Havoc now. Maybe Bryan Singer hates Havoc because maybe he also kind of hates Scott. He was a big player in the first class, and now this one and Apocalypse, he's going to get the poop end of the stick. They can't help but poop on the Summers brothers. But anyway, I liked seeing Havoc again and he was supposed to die in this movie, but they didn't kill him.
It was nice that it was nice to have the moment between him and Mystique as they're getting on the plane, just like a reminder these people
have
know
history.
Each other, like for real.
Yeah, and the when she's like, I had it, he's like, I know. Wolverine arrives at the X-Mansion, but sadly, the sign is on the ground.
Yep.
It's not hanging. It's on the ground.
There's grass everywhere.
Yeah, the fountain looks terrible. Beast answers the door, and Wolverine doesn't recognize him at first until...
and he's not blue.
He's not blue, right.
Last time we saw him, wasn't he blue?
He was blue. He was stuck being blue. But these movies also love... finding ways around the big makeup / effect characters. I'm surprised we didn't see Apocalypse just walking around in like a normal human form the entire movie, and then sometimes with big and blue. Yeah, that's why Wolverine doesn't recognize him at first, because he's just Nicholas Hoult. And it's kind of funny when Wolverine realizes it's Beast, though. He's like, wait, you're Beast? I like that line, like, you must be a late bloomer.
Yeah.
And then
I like that he, like, prods him. He's like, come on out.
Yeah, come on, Beastie, fight.
From poor Nicholas Holt's perspective, that's got to be, like, really cruel.
Yeah,
like,
cruel
hurtful.
and weird.
But he's friends with him in the future. Yeah. So, like, they might just have that dynamic, you know? But he doesn't know that.
Yeah, because, like, a stranger you've never met has come in, knows your name, and is now, come on, Beastie, come on. It's like, no, stop. It's funny because he says we're going to be good friends, punches him in the face and walks away, and then Beast just, like, tosses him through the mansion.
Just destroys him.
It's so funny. That's really fun. That Wolverine scream as he's flying across the stairwell is like, ah! It cracks me up. But then Xavier breaks up the fight and gasp, Professor, walking.
What?
He's walking again. Last time we saw him, he couldn't walk.
Yep, so lots of things have transpired since we last saw these characters.
Yeah. 10 years for them, 3 years for us, though the Wolverine was only a year before. He's taking a serum to help with his powers, to help with the depression, allow him to walk again.
Yeah, this is a multi-purpose serum.
Yeah, Beast is basically a drug pusher.
Yeah, basically. I mean, he's like a serious enabler because he knows that he's abusing it.
He's abusing it. He knows that he's taking too much. He admits that he takes it himself. And the imagery is basically heroin.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, Hank, do you suck?
I mean, the Hank that we've seen so far, and like the way he's interacted with Mystique, and the way he latches on to Xavier, you could see him being this type of person.
He's just doing a terrible thing. But anyways, Wolverine convinces him that he's from the future, but then Xavier remembers Wolverine from First Class when they went to go recruit him, and he quotes him saying that, go F off or whatever. And it's a callback, and I don't think it works because I think we're supposed to laugh.
Yeah, well, it's hard because McAvoy is emoting the crap out of it.
Right.
And so it feels
serious. Genuine. Yeah, it feels like a genuine F off, but I wonder if we're supposed to take it as like a ha ha ha, like in First Class.
Right, because it's such a comic line in the first. Anyway, this is a moment where there is some extra in the road cut.
Right.
When Wolverine first brings up
20 minutes. We should say that. There's 20 minutes with the road cut because my movie was 2 hours and like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And yours is like 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we should say about the road cut. It's there's some scenes that were cut, but also there are scenes that were completely reshot.
Right. Yeah.
And storylines that were redone completely. Yeah. So it's quite different.
When we get to a certain moment, it's just a completely different script.
So anyway, in this one, there's just a little bit more of incredulous reactions to the idea of time travel and like Wolverine having to convince them a little bit, which again is something I like to have for the audience to be able to accept the situation along with them.
That's funny because while watching it this time, I was like, I'm glad we don't have to just have him constantly like, no, I'm from the future. I was kind of like impressed by how quickly, and you know what? Later on in the movie when they tell Magneto, like, you're not going to believe this, it's like, well, it doesn't seem like that hard to believe, mutant community, that eventually somehow a mutant might have time travel.
Yeah, but I still think that this is territory that is uncharted for them. Like they've seen people fly, they've seen people, do amazing things.
Right.
I still think that if someone that you've never met walks up to your door and says, "I'm from the future," it's just such a stereotype. I think it definitely makes sense that
no one has ever walked up to my door to say they were from the future.
I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, that's fine.
In that regard.
You know what?
That's really
I'd
tough.
believe them for once.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even ask for proof.
I will do whatever you say. Yeah, Did you have the thing where they were talking about having the internet?
No.
Okay, because that's something that I think was added in the road cut that I don't like.
Yeah.
Because it's just this stupid little scene where Wolverine's like, "Too bad you guys don't have the internet." And they're like, "What's the internet?"
Yeah, that's not the only wink wink kind of thing that makes into the theatrical cut that sometimes it doesn't work. That seems a little below what this movie's going for.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's stuff that they cut that makes sense, but what's the internet?
So that they just accept it. It's really funny because he says that, and there's this moment where Xavier is just like, "I don't know," and they just move on.
And not that Wolverine is somebody who you would probably use the internet anyways.
He's a hacker.
No. If you know anybody who doesn't even have an email account, it's gonna be Wolverine.
He's got an AOL account.
Oh my gosh.
Rogue made it for him.
Yeah, find him on AIM still. So they talk about they have to get Magneto, because back when they were sending Wolverine through, Magneto kind of steps up and is like, "You're going to need my help too." And I'm kind of like, do they though? But I guess because he knows about Mystique, but they find
I guess they don't really follow that through, do they, character-wise? Because the implication is that they are going to need both sides to convince Mystique to do something, but they don't really follow through on that.
And I guess you need Magneto because Xavier doesn't have his powers at the time.
I guess. But I mean, it could be anybody.
You have to wonder, what's Magneto trying to do here? I mean, later, it seems like in the future he genuinely wants to help, but...
I think he does. And I think him saying, "You'll need me too," could still be genuine.
Right.
From future him. You'll probably need both of us to convince her. But I think maybe they're just incorrect about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically it. That it's not about either of these two. It's just about Mystique.
Right. Which is a thread that I really enjoy about this movie.
They have to get Magneto out. He's in prison because he killed JFK.
Okay. I love this movie, and I think they do a lot of things really, really great. But this idea that he was somehow involved in the JFK assassination because the bullet curved is a step too far for Hilary.
Matthew Vaughn, I think, is the one who came up with the JFK connection, but I think his plan was to actually have Magneto be the one who did kill JFK.
I just think it's cheesy.
Yeah, I remember reading reviews calling it tacky as well later on when they say JFK was a mutant.
Yeah, I hated that because he's like, I thought, oh yeah, because he said he was
one of
trying
us.
to protect him because he's one of us.
Yeah.
And I was like, ugh.
And the review I read called that tacky and everything. And I can see that. I can see the appeal of you have a character who controls metal in the 70s and 60s. You're going to want to include them with the magic bullet kind of storyline.
Yeah, but like that's the kind of thing that you're like, wouldn't it be funny if we did this? Yeah. And then you move on. You don't actually put it in the movie.
It's probably not done as well as what it was. We see Mystique again. She's pretending to be Trask. She's back to sneaky Mystique. Remember how sneaky Mystique used to be in like X-Men 2? Yeah. When she was just hacking computers? Now she only has to hack filing cabinets. So that's a little easier. Or maybe it's harder because you don't know which file is where.
Yeah, it could be anywhere.
You can't just be like, hey Siri, where's the Sentinel stuff? We learn about all the dead first-class mutants here.
Yeah, those are some graphic, and you really see her emotion. Yeah. In that scene when she's seeing all the people that you know that she knows.
Yeah, well, don't forget when First Class ended, she was with the Brotherhood now, so she was with Azazel and what's his name,
Angel,
Angel and Azazel and Riptide. But also we're told Banshee was also killed, and it's just and Emma was killed, and so that's very frustrating to me. I was not happy with that when I first saw that because I'm like, well, just because you don't have a thing for them to do now doesn't mean you should kill them off. It's frustrating.
That's true because that's in the past.
Yeah.
And they're already dead.
Yeah.
So you just can't use them ever.
Right. Because First Class ended in that kind of like, oh, we're going to see Magneto with this like new Brotherhood kind of thing. And I had hoped that, we'd maybe get like a better version of Emma Frost coming forward, but...
Well, maybe you could go back in time.
Oh, yeah.
To like before
go back in
that.
time before they got captured.
Because at this point, Mystique is no longer with them. Mm-hmm. Like she and Magneto had some... schism.
Out. Yeah, well, he said he left her when he went to Dallas to go stop the assassination. So
like maybe we could go back and see the time before he left. It's still possible, Eric.
Yeah, there's still room. Not anymore. But yeah, we find out all the characters that we were supposed to be invested in First Class are dead. But the X-Men, they're going to need... I shouldn't say the X-Men because nobody's really called the X-Men in this movie.
They call them that at some point, don't they?
Wolverine mentions the name, but they need help. They need somebody to break in. So this is where the Juggernaut scene was supposed to happen. I don't know if like we were going to have a connection between Xavier and Juggernaut. It doesn't seem like it would have made any sense.
Yeah, that's true.
But
well, I'm glad they trashed that because that's not. There's no finesse to that.
No, instead they went with Quicksilver, who is very much unlike he is in the comics because depending on which comics you're reading, he's usually just kind of a prick.
Yeah, and he's got kind of a fastidious manner to him.
He's very much better than everyone else. He is played by Evan Peters, who I think was coming off of American Horror Story at the time. Evan Peters, he was saying of the character, he described Quicksilver as very fast. He talks quick, he moves quick. Everything else is very slow compared to him. It's like he's always at the ATM waiting for the bastard in front of him to finish. He talked at a Comic-Con. And that's right out of a Peter David X Factor comic where they're all going through like a therapy session and Quicksilver is like, imagine you're behind that 80-year-old woman at the ATM and that's every day for you. You'd probably have a bad case of PMS too. But I don't think this Quicksilver doesn't seem like he's really annoyed with anything. He's just hyperactive. He's got ADD at high speeds.
Yeah, I think his way of coping with it probably is to have like an attitude about it and to just like be amused by everything. Because the way he plays with things. Yeah, and like when you see him actually use his power, how he is so playful with it. Yeah, it makes you think that's just how he is with everything.
And the way he's like, they're like, you're not afraid of people finding out about powers. Like, what power? Nothing anyone would believe you if you said. So he's acting out. He's got this like, I don't know, kind of bad boy, but he seems like a pretty good kid already.
He seems like a nice kid,
though,
who can get away with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he joins because the idea of breaking into the Pentagon is so different and exciting. Yeah. So I guess when you move that fast, you got to get your thrills when you can because it's gone in the Flash.
It's true.
So yeah, the Flash. Was the Flash on at the time? Yeah, The Flash was airing. Anyway,
Was it really?
I think so.
That
2015.
long ago? Oh, I guess that's not as long ago as I feel like it is.
I think actually it was gonna start airing that
Mm.
September, so probably after this movie. I think the speed effect looks pretty good. They don't really do a speed effect when he runs. He's just in one place and then another. So there's no like motion blur on him.
Yeah, but they do good. I don't know if you'd call it choreography, but the staging of that first scene is pretty good with him. It goes with his speed and it goes with his like ADD kind of manner that he's just like all over the place and like when he's talking to them, carrying on a conversation and just like zooming all over and like playing video games and all of that.
He was definitely like the breakout character of this movie.
Definitely. He's great. Yeah,
people loved him. I think the scene we're going to talk about later on is one of the most memorable scenes that people talk about. I think they just did a good job with that character, even if he isn't, comic accurate. I think
he's definitely different, but he's a good interpretation.
So the X-Men go on a tour of the Pentagon. They love a good tour.
I forgot another addition in the Rogue Cut.
Rogue Cut.
Which we've talked about previously on this podcast.
You know what? Every time it's a Rogue Cut time, you should be like, hey, y'all, Rogue
hey,
here.
Y'all.
Gotta tell you about my little cut.
I'm not going to do that.
So in my movie...
okay, when they first arrive to talk to Quicksilver, there's like a scene where Wolverine sort of lingers at the front door near the living room, and there's a little girl there in a princess costume.
Yes, yeah.
She comes up and says, I'm a princess. And he says, where's your brother? And then he goes. And then the mom says to the little girl, go bug your sister, who we're led to assume is
Wanda.
Scarlet Witch. And she says, no, she bugs me. And it's just a cute little scene where you can just be like, oh, hey.
Yeah, Wanda will never show up in these movies, but that's probably as close as we got then.
Yep, just a little mention
and
in a cutscene.
They're twins, so Wanda should be the same age as him in this movie. So it makes sense, because I remember when the picture was released and we see a shot of him with his younger sister in the princess costume. I'm like, oh, is that supposed to be like the Scarlet Witch? But then I was like, wait a second, that doesn't track. Okay, so back to the theatrical cut. X-Men love a good tour. They love Nightcrawler liked going on a tour. In X-Men 3, they liked going on a tour. X-Men 2, they also went on a tour at the museum.
Did you know that if you want to get into a place that is heavily guarded, all you have to do is join a tour?
Why would you even have a tour, then, if you need something so heavily guarded? Seems like a security risk that's just not worth it.
You just want to give people the opportunity, if they are that invested, to take the tour and then slip off into a side hallway.
Okay. All right.
Gotta reward them for their desires.
Yeah. Beast has a fanny pack.
Yeah, and very obviously is using this device.
Yeah. Yeah, people aren't quick in these films to question what's happening.
It's like the biggest, which of course it would be, but like it's huge and it's very obviously some sort of spy tech that someone would notice.
Yeah. Quicksilver captures a guard, like duct tapes him to a wall and then steals his clothes and everything. And then he's walking down there and he seems kind of nervous, but I was just thinking, like, wouldn't these guards recognize the guy who's supposed to bring the food?
I guess he's counting on them not really looking.
Yeah, I guess.
Like he's just coming at the scheduled time. He's wearing a hat.
I guess
I could see people
expect
just
somebody
being like,
oh, where's Craig? Oh, sick again.
He's sick.
Craig.
He's lazy.
Always. Oh, yeah, that tracks with Craig.
Good guess.
Fassbender's back. He's not as face bending in this movie as he was in the first movie. He's not as. Well,
he just doesn't have as many opportunities.
Well, he's not as young and furious in the same way he was in the first movie. He's less.
Yeah. How long has he been in this prison?
I don't know. When was?
It's been years, right?
When was JFK assassinated? What year?
63?
63?
63.
Oh, dang. Well, then, he's been in this prison for quite a while, for 10 years.
Yeah.
He was so, angry and simmering and he had a lot more physicality in the way he used his powers in the first movie, but I still love him in this movie. It's all fine.
Yeah. Well, he's just great. He's really established himself as this character. He's very settled in it. You just buy him.
Yeah. That scene where, I guess you can kind of get some of that attitude from Quicksilver when he's holding Fassbender's neck and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm holding you so you don't get whiplash. He's like, what? Whiplash.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
He's just such a brat.
Yeah. It's kind of funny when he gets into the elevator and it starts moving. I noticed this brief moment where Quicksilver seemed like he was like, oh, now I'm in an elevator for however knows how long this is.
Yeah, there definitely was.
And then he starts picking at Magneto's like, what'd you do? What'd you do, man?
I feel like was a nod to the cartoon.
You mean like X-Men Evolution?
Because that's like exactly how he talks in Evolution.
His clothing is supposed to resemble like early 1980s, like 1981 fashion, and so it's supposed to show you that he's like moving so fast he's ahead of the times.
Cute.
I like that line too. It doesn't seem like a line that would come from Magneto, where he's like, "I don't know karate, but I do know crazy."
Yeah,
and it's just
sure,
like
it's not very him.
It's not very Magneto, but I still love it anyway. Fassbender delivers it pretty well. It's just so funny to hear it come out of like Magneto, and then he gets punched in the face right as the doors open from Xavier.
Ah, yes.
Yeah,
that's their first meeting in however many years.
Yeah, it was either punch him or kiss him. So
Yeah,
you go with whatever your emotions is the strongest at the time.
Now, this is the start of what I find to be a very interesting and short-lived dynamic between the two of them, because you don't really know at this stage why Xavier is so mad at him,
right?
Except that, like, he's a bad guy, I guess.
Right.
And then, like, you get to see throughout the next few scenes exactly what's going on there, which is kind of a complex emotional response. We will learn that it's a little more complicated.
Magneto, it's funny how like resigned he is, because he doesn't know Xavier doesn't have his powers. Like when Xavier's like, no killing, is like, couldn't if I wanted to. I got no helmet. And it's just kind of like, if he knows, at the same time he knows like Xavier doesn't really abuse his power. So even though he did a lot in First Class, so maybe he still remembers First Class Xavier, who doesn't care about whose mind he goes into.
Well, I think he probably suspects that if he did try, like if he started to try to kill someone, Xavier would stop him.
And then we get the Quicksilver scene, because all the guards show up and they kind of weren't expecting it. Wolverine pops his claws. Magneto's ready to blast everything. And the guns fire. But we go to the Quicksilver scene with time in a bottle.
Yeah, everything like freezes. And then he pops the little headphones in his ears.
Yep. This movie's action is great in a lot of places. But in terms of like the memorable action scene like X-Men 2 had, or like X-Men First Class had, this one doesn't have a lot of like those Nightcrawler in the White House kind of moments. So this is really,
well, I mean,
like,
this is that.
Yeah, this is that moment. This is that standout action scene. I think it's one of the reasons why people remember, because a lot of the action in this movie tends to be more tense and a little bit more simmery. This is like the one big set piece. And it's funny because it's actually more of like, it's not like an action set piece really, in the same way that like we've talked about them in the past. Down. Yeah, because it's slowed down, and a lot of it's more just like comedic setup, I guess. But it's just so stylish, such a fun use of that power, and a little bit more fun with mutant powers than we've seen in some of the more dour X films. Yeah. Considering also how dour this film is at times.
Yeah. It's got a fun attitude to it. Yeah. It's interesting too. Like when you get a close up of Quicksilver, you're going to see everything else be slowed down. But he is also slowed down a little bit in this, and so it's an interesting way to be looking at a super fast character. Right. Like his pinnacle moment is actually this slow jam kind of action.
Like, you have to imagine that he has to be able to turn this kind of like mental focus on and off. Otherwise, you just go insane.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But yeah, this scene is just so well done and so well constructed, and like the effect of it all, like everything moving in slow motion and him moving everything is so good that like it's been cribbed by the next X-Men movie. By Sonic the Hedgehog just rips the scene off 100%. There's a scene in the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie where he's in a bar. It's the same thing, just slow motion, messing with things, giving people wedgies in slow motion while a song plays, and then it ends, and there has to be some legality in there.
I mean, maybe they asked. Yeah. Maybe they were like, can we just rip this off?
Maybe.
I'll talk about this for the next movie, but I hate that they reprise this scene.
I'll talk about it in the next movie. I also don't like the way they reprise it, but I think they could have reprised it and given it some more tension. But we'll get to that when we get to
there
Apocalypse.
Are definitely ways they could have made it work.
But I think what also, this Quicksilver scene is so good, and this performance is so fun, that it just makes Quicksilver in Age of Ultron such a nothing character.
Well, I mean, he's already a nothing. All he is in Ultron is a setup for Wanda.
Right. But yeah, they don't give him any like personality, not like he has in this movie. And like the use of his powers, it's like nothing. He never, considering the money they have and the creativity they had for like on board for Age of Ultron, you think they would have had a Quicksilver scene, but it was just like, did they just watch this and be like, forget it?
Well, that's what I wonder. Like, having done him in such a striking way in these movies, maybe they were just like, let's just hold on that. We'll deal with Wanda.
Yeah.
She's someone we haven't seen.
Joss Whedon, there's a quote somewhere, I didn't look for it, where he basically said Days of Future Past went to the mattress with that scene. So
Yeah, it's true.
It's a great scene.
One more thing that we didn't mention in the elevator scene, that he says something about Magneto manipulating metal, and he's like, my mom knew someone who could do that.
Yeah, we're supposed to know. Yeah.
Just a cute little, like, maybe he's his dad.
Yeah. And there's also that funny moment where he's like, what'd you do? He's like, I killed the president. And he's like, wow. And then he turns to the guy he duct taped. He's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So that's Quicksilver's big moment, and everybody punches themselves. But then, goodbye, Quicksilver.
Nice knowing you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing our rental car back.
I like that you still have that little moment with Xavier as if he's a student, where he's just sort of like, be good or whatever.
Yeah,
he says something to him,
yeah.
and it's just a nice little, like, I'm the teacher, you're
Take
the
it slow or
pupil.
something.
Yeah, something like that.
They get on the plane. There's a lot of plane conversations on this. A lot of plane time in these movies.
It's just Wolverine, Magneto, Xavier, and Beast on the plane.
Can I just say, I don't know if I wrote this down somewhere else. Again, Nicholas Hoult as Beast, I just do not care about him. He's so much of a non-presence in this movie in a lot of ways, and he's such an enabler. I don't know. I don't like him. I know that he gets more scenes in the road cut, specifically
he does,
a scene
yeah.
with Mystique.
We'll talk more about him later on.
There's just something about him, and I'm just like...
Yeah, well, you've got a chip on your shoulder about Nicholas Hoult. I've never disliked him, and I think I would err on the side of I like him.
Okay, well,
as Beast.
With this one, maybe I'll have a note, but there was a scene I'm just like, oh, just shut up. You're the worst.
Well, yeah, there's a scene later where he goes full on enabler.
There's a scene where Magneto goes to grab the newspaper, and Wolverine's claws come out, and Magneto says, "Imagine if they were metal." And that's, for me, is like one of those like barf.
Yeah,
that's imagine. Like, why would he even say that?
But I love this scene because I just love how the two of them play, Magneto and Xavier. I just love their interactions.
Yeah, Xavier's very much been throwing himself a pity party for a few years. We can ascertain from all this. And when he's talking about how, like, you stole Magneto, you stole Mystique from me, you took her from me, you abandoned me. And he's like, you abandoned us when all these people were dying and everything was happening. Where were you?
He abandoned the mission.
When Magneto's standing up and giving this speech and, like, the plane's shaking and it's yelling and the way the camera is, I don't know if it's because he grows up to be Ian McKellen, but it feels like one of those Gandalf moments.
Oh,
in Lord of the Rings, where he's like,
where he, like, swells.
Baggins! I am not trying to rob you! It doesn't get darker in those scenes, but it always feels very much like a Gandalf showing his power kind of moment.
Well, especially in this movie, because for at least a good portion of this movie, he's very conciliatory. He's like, I've done wrong things. Right. I'm gonna, like, let you be mad at me and, like, that kind of thing. And so it has that like calm, and then, no, I'm serious. I'm gonna freak out on this.
Right.
But this is one of those moments I was talking about with Xavier's emotional response to Magneto, because this is the first time, like, you go into it and you're like, he's mad at him, I guess, because of Mystique and because of him murdering the president.
Right.
But then this is the first time that you get that vulnerability from him, that, like, he's also upset because he was his close friend who just like ditched him.
Yeah. And
so you have, like, that level of emotional, you have the level of him turning on him and, like, causing his paralysis and those kinds of things start to come in this scene.
Yeah.
Where things are coming to a head with them.
Yeah, because it starts with him saying, like, you gave up your power so that you could walk.
Yeah.
And he's like, I gave up my power so I could sleep. And then, it just starts from there. And then
that's like one of those crystallized moments, too, of, like, the difference between them. Because just the way that Magneto says you gave up your power so you could walk is, like, you see that, like, Magneto, his power is the most important thing to him.
Right.
Which is just not the case for Xavier.
Right. And it all kind of, I guess Wolverine brings down the tension by being, like, such a dad. When he's like, are you going to clean all this crap up?
I really like his manner with the first class people, because they're just kids to him.
Yeah.
Like, he's been living forever, and, like, he knows these people as grown-ups, and he's just like, okay, you guys,
and when he says you're gonna pick this crap up, it's like his facial expression is just so, like, because I'm not.
Yeah.
It's just so,
these two characters, this is post-Cuban Missile Crisis,
right,
where they have like really royally flexed their muscles. And so in their minds, they are these super impactful, like important people. And to have Wolverine just not be impressed at all, it's just a fun touch.
Also, chess, Hilary.
They bring in the chess.
Chess!
Very cute.
Even I mean, oh gosh, do we see it in Apocalypse? I know we see it in Dark Phoenix.
There's always chess. They can't exist together without playing chess.
Oh, my lord. Yeah, this is where we find out JFK was a mutant.
Ugh.
And Xavier's like, you must think I'm such a fool.
Yeah, that turnaround was a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's very abrupt, and I guess maybe it's just, like, there's a way that it works, that he's, like, been holding this resentment for years, and then he finally bursts out with it, and he's like getting this out, and then he can sort of realize what he's been doing, and like that he's just been wallowing in self-pity and stuff, and then that allows him to reconcile with him. But something about how it was directed or the dialogue or something is just very weird in that moment.
Maybe he's just coming down from not having his fix in a while.
Yeah.
Xavier's emotions are all over the place until his supplier gets to him. In between these two scenes, this Mystique is in Paris, and she gets one of the generals alone and takes him out so that she can like infiltrate the meeting and everything. She's holding him by the neck with her foot. Yeah. And her leg is so split in the air.
I was really impressed with that. Isn't that something that Rebecca Romijn does?
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca Romijn always does. Yeah, she does that a few times. But it was like, I'm looking at it, and there was a shot where I'm like, maybe that's just a stunt double. But then there's another scene where I'm like, I think it is Jennifer Lawrence. Can she do that?
Maybe she does yoga.
I couldn't, like, if they were like, all right, now hold that person with your foot by their neck. I couldn't do it. I could barely get to, like, their belly button. I'm like, this hurts. Can't I just hold them with my hands?
Funny.
I wouldn't even want to lift my hands that high up. I'm like, I'm tired.
You know what's more impressive?
What?
More impressive than her holding him there is if you watch when she lets him down, she doesn't just let him drop. Right. She just slowly, controlled, lowers that leg.
Like, is Jennifer Lawrence like a dancer or something?
Maybe she is. I don't know.
It seemed like something you would get a stunt person to do, or like there's a fake leg being held up by a prop guy. Is that something I should be able to do? Am I not normal?
Not unless you exercise in a specific way.
Mystique is at the Paris Accords, hiding out there, because now we find out Trask, he'll sell the Sentinels to anyone, because he
just wants it to happen.
Right. It doesn't matter what country buys the Sentinels. He just wants the Sentinels to happen.
Sense. Like, it's not just treachery. It's like his plan to bring everyone together.
If he thinks he's right, he's not trying to go behind anyone's back. He's just trying to make sure that how he sees protecting humanity happens.
Yeah.
And he's selling them at this piece of cords on the Sentinels, and he takes out the little thing how it can track mutants, and then it goes off, and we find out the general is actually Mystique. Mystique takes out a bunch of people in the room again. Mystique is basically Chun-Li, because she basically only fights with her feet and legs.
That's true. She also does it's very gymnastic.
Yeah.
A lot of the moves she does are like what you do in gymnastics.
And I think we didn't really see her I don't think we saw her fight at all in First Class. It's a lot more of the style of how we know Mystique to move with Rebecca Romijn.
Right, yeah. They probably have her do so much with her feet because they're trying to get her to seem more animalistic.
I mean, I like it. I like that that's like a thing that Mystique does. It's unique. But it just kind of dawned on me as she's like kicking people with her feet. I'm like, oh, you know who else does that? Chun-Li. The X-Men show up to stop her because she's about to shoot Trask in the head. But they all run in and stop her, save her from the electrodes and everything. And then Magneto decides he's going to shoot Mystique because that's the only way to really save the future. And I'm just and everyone's like, Magneto, no. And I'm just like, that's Eric.
Yeah, I mean, it is. But also, I sort of feel like that's a little too short-sighted for him. Like, I don't understand why he didn't just, let them take their plan to the next step where they're not in, the place where she was going to murder someone and, then take care of her. You know what I mean? Like, I don't not think he would kill her, but it just seems a little too impulsive. Like, I'm just going to shoot you right here. There's people who are going to take your body anyway, and they're just going to still get what they want.
And I wonder if in this scene, Magneto's just like, you know what? I gotta do this. I gotta do this. It's crazy, but I just gotta go with it.
It just doesn't seem like him, you know? No, does he seem like that kind of guy?
No, it does. I mean, yes, to me, Magneto would kill anybody. to
Of course he
protect
would, but
him
he
and
would be
mutants'
smart
future.
about it.
Yeah, and it does seem strange, especially to do it to Mystique.
Here's how I can make it make sense. He's not an impulsive person, but maybe in order to kill someone that he cares about as much as he cares about Mystique, he has to force himself to be quick, and then he's not as thoughtful about it.
Yeah. Wolverine can't help because when he looks down, guess who he sees? Stryker.
Trask. Oh, I wrote the wrong name. Stryker.
He sees young Stryker, and we get a flashback to the X-Men 2, really.
Basically has like a crazy PTSD.
Kitty told him that he's going to have to stay calm and think peaceful thoughts, because if the mind gets too frazzled, it's going to snap back to the future. All the stuff that he's pushed away over the years that Stryker did, it just comes back to him. Takes over, and in the future, his claws come out, he cuts Kitty. Magneto locks his arms down, but it's such a slow reaction.
I know.
He watches them flare around a little bit, cut Kitty, and then he does it. He's like, restrain him. It's like, well, why didn't you restrain the guy with the metal claws first? Like,
why
once
weren't
you said
you just holding him that whole time?
Yeah, Wolverine of the 70s comes back. And it's not Wolverine of the future anymore. Right. It's like, where am I? And then it's so funny when Beast pops up in full Beast form. He's like, what the hell is that? Yeah. His reaction is so funny. And then Xavier just kind of is like, you're on acid.
I know. I love that.
Really
that moment
acid.
of decision where he's trying to explain and then he's like, you're having a bad trip.
Yeah, Xavier suddenly remembers that he's in the 70s too. Who is it? It's Beast who tackles Magneto, but Magneto, because he is who he is able to keep the gun floating. And able to direct the bullet even though Mystique is jumping out a window. Yeah. Which is a pretty cool, like, slow effect. I tend to hate slow motion in movies, especially action movies. But I think the slow motion in this movie is actually being used to add to the tension of it all.
Oh, I think so, yeah. When do we go back to the future for you?
Well,
in the theatrical
we get
trailer?
a quick glimpse of it with restrain him and seeing that Kitty's been cut and some blood dripping. But because
there's a lot added around here, but I'm not sure exactly where it is.
Well,
as far as
in the theatrical cut, you're doing all the fighting between Beast and Magneto and Mystique trying to get away. I like that John Ottman is back and that he's bringing in the old like X-Men 2 music, but when Magneto's doing this, when he's after Mystique and he's shooting through the window and everything, the music is almost doing that Frankenstein's monster music from First Class, and I wish it just did. Because that was such like a cool theme, and I don't think it would be totally out of place to do maybe a slower or more darker version of that song for when Magneto is trying to kill her. I just want some continuity through this stuff. Anyway,
that's not too much to ask. Well, it's nice in this scene you get Magneto being a villain again, and you also get that moment when Beast is being held up there,
and everybody's gawking at him,
and everybody's taking pictures, and he freaks out and runs away. Yeah, just a nice little.
He gets kind of sad. Moment. He's like, "Oh right. I'm a monster!" And then Stryker gets up and walks out, and him and Wolverine catch glances, and I guess it's kind of our meet cute for these two.
Aww.
There's a scene where, like, Magneto... Because Beast is gonna straight up murder Magneto in this scene. He's holding him underwater.
It's true.
And there's no inclination that he's gonna let him back up. Because, like, we know Beast does not like Magneto because of Mystique as well. Because in the first film... they have a romance, and Magneto was kind of a jerk to him, and they just didn't like each other. So yeah, I think Beast is going to straight up murder him. Magneto finally gets out of the water. He does that like just casual. He doesn't even care about it when the cops are running up to him. Just that like forced magnetic push with them. Mm-hmm. I love it when he's just not like that subtle use where he's not even looking at him. He's like, get out of my face.
I guess it's around here because it's when they start talking about bringing Rogue in, because Wolverine has stabbed Kitty. And I think in the theatrical release, she just fights through it for the rest of the movie. This is the moment when Bobby brings somebody in because she can't take this, and he's acting as he and Kitty are like together. Right. So he's wanting to protect her, but it's also a practical concern. He says we need to replace her. Picard. It's not Picard.
Oh my goodness.
Xavier. Xavier says, well, sure, but there's nobody else who has her power. Right. Bobby says, well, but we have somebody who could take her power. Mm-hmm. Xavier says, well, I'm sorry, she must be dead. We haven't seen her in years. But Bobby has secret knowledge from his little crew that Rogue has been kept in the X Mansion, which has been occupied by the Sentinels. And, well, why don't we go break in and rescue her, bring her back, she can take Kitty's place.
I hope that they only just got this info about Rogue, because part of me is like, did they know this whole time that Rogue's been captured?
Well, I think that they did. And he says something about how they tried to rescue her, but it's just impenetrable.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
To think that they knew.
It sucks.
Yeah.
Because, like, I guess the bad guys have been trying to use her power to, like...
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. If you're saying
take
that
away their
Sentinel
powers.
technology is using Mystique's power, Rogue's power would make sense as well.
Yeah. So that whole discussion happens around this time.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when that happened, and I don't understand anything about like first aid, so I was like, should Bobby like freeze the cut? Probably not. But they have Sunspot. Shouldn't Sunspot
cauterize it? I don't think there's any good way to handle that because there's like organs involved.
Right. Yeah, again, restrain the guy with the claws first. But anyway, the whole conversation is happening. Nixon, we get a scene in the White House with Nixon with Trask, where Trask is selling him on the Sentinels again and explaining what mutants are and what those people do and how his Sentinels work and everything. It's interesting because JFK was in First Class, but it was old news footage. This, they just cast a Nixon.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good amount of not exactly like Nixon.
Yeah, it's probably like the spirit of Nixon as opposed to...
Yeah, I think that's a good choice if you're going to do it.
Yes, Nixon would have greenlit the Sentinels. So
that your assessment.
That's my assessment. It just tracks. After watching that Vietnam documentary by Ken Burns, I was like, they're gonna greenlight these Sentinels if given the chance. So yeah, when Nixon is like, how much do you need? I'm like, yep, okay. Magneto's performing medical aid on himself.
Yeah, I kept
so
trying to see that because, like, is there a mirror involved? Like, what exactly is he doing?
I don't know. He's got a needle and thread in the back with his powers, but then he's also using his powers to go through the files that he has on the Sentinels with like a makeshift projector. So yeah, I don't know if he's like using a mirror, if he's just like, I know where the cut is. It's a cool moment for Magneto. Mystique grabs Magneto in the middle of like a subway or a train station. They have this whole discussion, and Magneto's like, yeah, it's my fault they have your DNA now. I shouldn't have tried to kill you and everything. And he's talking about her. It's like, what happened? You used to be strong. Are you still Xavier's Raven, or are you Mystique? And there's something about the way he says it. It's like, Magneto can't spell Mystique without my.
Oh, that's pithy. That's pithy, Eric.
Yeah. Are you Xavier's Raven, or are you my Mystique kind of thing? But he doesn't say my because he's so manipulative.
He's so manipulative.
He says, I've never lied to you and I never will. I'm like, okay, but...
Oh, yeah. I love Mystique's arc in this movie because I find it very cathartic after all of the crap she goes through in First Class. You see exactly how Xavier treats her. You see in this moment exactly how she's just a tool for Magneto. And then eventually, which we'll talk about, we see her kind of rise above all of that.
This always cracks me up in any movie, but specifically this one. We know they had to fly from Paris back to New York. So when they walk into the mansion and Xavier's like, well, that was a waste of time. I'm like, what have you been talking about for this past 12 hours? Anyway, it's just... He's
just been holding it. He stews now. He's a steward.
Freaking beast. Serum is wearing off again. Feet aren't working anymore. His power's coming back. And Beast comes down. He's like, I added a little extra since you missed a dose. And I'm like, stop it, Beast. Do not double his dose of his drugs. It's just... He's
just so eager to, like...
You're right.
He thinks he's helping him. You know what I mean? But, like, he's just being awful.
There's a moment where things aren't working, and Xavier seems like he's going to use the serum again. And Wolverine's like, look, I'm still here. Things can still change. We can do this. And it's like, you don't really see Wolverine this desperate a lot of times. This, like, he's just running out of options and, like, emoting in such a way that's kind of like, oh, Wolverine, hold on. We're going to do this.
It's true. Well, because I love how he recognizes that he's not the right person for this job. He's just the only one who could do it.
So this is where we get the Trask conversation. Trask talks about his beliefs because Stryker is like, wow, you really hate mutants, huh? He's like, no, I admire them, the things they can do. But really, what he wants mutants to be is the one unifying force, the one true enemy that all of humanity can gather around to defeat.
Yeah, which this is a different kind of villain than we've had, even from Stryker.
Yeah,
because
Stryker
has
mutants.
a fear of mutants.
Right.
Trask, it's almost like it doesn't matter that it's mutants. It could be anything.
Right.
He just wants a common foe.
Right. Yeah. But it's funny because like when he says like I admire them, it's like they don't ever really get into this. But I mean, most of the anti-mutant bigotry that's in there is just you're just jealous because you missed your chance. You're not the one who can fly. You don't have cool bone claws. You're not going to live forever. You're just a regular person, and the dice didn't roll in your favor, and so now you have to hate mutants. You want a Sentinel because you didn't get ice powers.
Yeah.
But Xavier didn't use the serum. No matter how much Beast pushes him to it, he doesn't give in to Beast pressure and decides...
Because Wolverine says they need his power.
Yeah.
The only way to find Mystique is if they use Cerebro, basically.
Yeah. They head down there to Cerebro, and there's a bit of poetry in the filming, the way there's kind of like that slow motion dust being blown off the helmet. The X-basement, we get to see the 70s voice of the door. It's like, hello, Professor.
Yeah, it's kind of warped. I like that moment. I mean, I talk a lot about how much I like McAvoy's acting.
Mm-hmm.
I like in that moment when he blows the dust off of the hat, because every time that happens...
Did you just call Cerebro a hat?
Yes. The helmet of Cerebro.
Bring me my hat.
His cap. He blows the dust off, and I always hate that. I always think it's so, like,
cheesy,
melodramatic. Like, you'd pick up the book and you'd blow off the dust. Yeah. Who would ever do that? But there's just something about how he does it that feels like the character is thinking, I am now going to do that thing that people do and blow off the dust. Like, he's like self-aware when he's doing it, and I really liked that acting moment.
McAvoy gets a lot of like strong like actors acting moments. Like when he says, he never finishes that line where he says, I did it so I could sleep. He stops when he says, he's like, I did it so I could and then when he talks about why his power's not working, he's like, my power comes from here. It comes from... And then he gestures while his hand's shaking.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, there's just a lot of good in there. We get to see Wolverine's past through the movies because Wolverine's like, like you said, I'm the wrong person. It was supposed to be you, but I'm the only one who could make the trip. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the Charles Xavier, because like that's what this movie's trying to really do, invert the Xavier Wolverine relationship that we saw from the first two movies. They're now trying to put Wolverine, and they do that again with Logan, where Wolverine's now the professor and the one trying to help somebody through.
He has to guide Xavier into being Xavier, and he acknowledges that he can't.
Right. He knows someone who can, so he has Xavier read his mind, and he sees like all of Wolverine's past. They actually show shots from Origins. The bone claws being stepped on. Sorry, Hilary.
Oh god.
Sorry you had to see that again.
I love seeing that again.
Yeah. And
this is a moment that I think is really cool, and I think they do in this what they didn't do in Origins in Wolverine, the Origins one.
Okay.
Because when they shoot him in the head in Origins, and they're like, I'm going to erase his memories by shooting him in the head.
Right.
And if they had just not said, I'm going to erase his memories, it would have been fine, because that could be an accidental thing. That's what they do right in this moment, because he has Xavier look through his memories to see what he will become.
Right.
Incidentally, he also manages to travel through this psychic link and speak with the future Xavier. Which, if they had said, now I'm going to send you psychically back to see, that would have been awful.
Yeah,
but it fits better to have it be just this thing that happens accidentally.
Because Xavier gives this kind of speech to himself, because both Xaviers are just so good in this scene. The whole conversation is wonderful. The whole, like, McAvoy being like, there's so much pain. And he's like, he can barely say it because of all the pain that's inside him now. And Xavier's like, we can take that. That's our privilege to carry their burdens.
And that what he's really afraid of isn't their pain. It's his own pain.
Right. And it's just this conversation is so strong. And then it shows images of the school as it should be with the music. And it's just like, shut up, you're crying.
Yeah. And he says that he needs him to hope again.
Yeah.
And that's really what difference is between sulky Xavier and transcendent Xavier.
Just because somebody's lost doesn't mean they can't be brought back or find their way. It's just a really cool thing. Yeah,
it's the only time that we see past and future characters face to face.
Yeah.
It's just these two.
It's kind of like how there's two Spocks in the Star Trek movies. at some points. But, like, it'd be
True.
weird then to see two Shatners. Like, we never see Fassbender and McKellen interact, and after this Xavier scene, it would seem kind of, I don't know, redundant and trite and everything. Like, okay, we get it.
Well, I mean, this is the only way that would make sense anyway, because they both have that psychic thing. But yeah, it's a very good scene. And then as soon as he pulls out of that, he is like ready to go.
Yeah.
Because Beast ran out to try to fix the power for Cerebro because it wasn't working. And then he comes back in and he says, "The power's back on." And Xavier says, "Yes, it is."
Xavier's such a good teacher. He can teach himself.
He can teach himself.
That's
but this is such
a true
great
teacher.
moment because just seeing the difference between those two characters.
Oh, yeah.
But then you also, it's another moment where you can solidify that they are two halves of the same coin.
Yeah.
And just seeing Patrick Stewart conveying to his younger self who he will become. But then this is a moment where we get a substantial amount of new scenes in the road cut.
Yeah, okay, because for me, when this ends, we go back to the future and we see that Sentinels are coming and that they're on their way. And then we have a whole scene with Mystique in the airport.
Yes, that scene is extended in the road cut. The airport scene is extended just to have a little more conversation between Xavier and Mystique. A little more of the controlling type of Xavier, which I think is helpful for their over...
Can I just say, I love Mystique's hat.
It's very cute.
In the airport. It's such a fetch 1970s hat. And you have to imagine Mystique has made that hat with her powers.
It's true.
So, like, she just is like, you know what? She just knows style, I guess.
Stylish. It's very cute.
Like, you just see her in that big hat. I'm like, did you make that? Is that technically a flesh hat? But still.
Gross.
Yeah, sorry I said it that way. Is it a skin hat?
It's a skin hat. It's a hat made of skin.
But at the same time, it's just like, cool.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
But this is a good scene where Xavier is saying to Mystique, I mean, he's trying to convince her to stop.
Right.
But he keeps saying things like, you have to, you must. He reacts very negatively to that.
Charles just needs to start accepting women's rights. I guess he didn't pick up on it in, like, the 60s.
He just missed it.
Yeah, he was
holed up in Oxford being smart.
Yeah, that's the big point for him. As much, like you said, Mystique has to learn to make the decisions on her own, and Xavier has to learn, oh, wait, she can make her own decisions. Because you're right. He says when she's like, I have to, you haven't changed a bit. Like, that's the whole thing between the two of them. That she's tired of being bossed around.
And then Xavier says to somebody, it must be Magneto, so I don't remember when exactly this is. But he says something about, like, this is not the girl I raised.
Right.
And the other person is like, you didn't raise her, you grew up with her. Like, this is not the relationship that you should be having.
It must have been Beast, because Magneto's off the picture at this moment.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I couldn't remember if maybe it was different. That seems too confrontational for Beast.
Yeah, here's where I wrote Beast sucks, and I just don't know why. I guess it was about the way he's got those negative feelings about what they're doing. He's just like, some say time is like a river. You can throw a pebble, but it's gonna reset itself, and maybe it just wants to change. It's like, we don't need that, Beast. Just shut up.
Now that happens sort of within the extended scenes that they've added. So after this scene at the airport, like, he sends Xavier to bed or something. He's like, go to bed, you're tired or something. And so Xavier goes to bed, and then we have Beast
and Mystique
just like living life, and he comes out and he sees Mystique trying to get in some other door. There's like 2 doors to the mansion. She's trying to get into the other one. I don't know. But so he lets her in, and she says something about, like, she realized there was nowhere else for her to go. She basically just, like, sucks him right in. And I don't know if at this point we're supposed to know that she's manipulating him, but I think there's it's like a dual situation. I think she is manipulating him. I think she's also being genuine with him in certain respects. Right. Xavier goes to bed. Beast comes up to Wolverine and asks him if he makes it in the future. And Wolverine, he has this whole thing about, like, I don't know if I can ask this. There's probably lots of rules about, like, what you can and can't say, but I thought I'd just ask, like, do I make it? And Wolverine's just like, nope. But then he says something about, like, but, that's just where I come from.
Right.
Maybe you'll be fine. Beast sees that Trask will be at the White House, and that's just something that'll come up later. Then he finds Mystique. They have a little chat. They go, I think they're by a fireplace. I don't know. It's something vaguely romantic, and they're having their relationship again, which I think is a really good addition to this movie that they just don't do in the theatrical cut, to like really lean into that romance that you sort of planted in First Class. I think it's a good step
Right.
for the two of them. I think it's good character growth for Beast. I think it's particularly good for Mystique because her little interplay with Beast is another like puzzle piece in her like growth away from Xavier. So I think that's a nice thing to include. If you look at this movie as a vehicle for Mystique to grow, I think that's a really good building block to include that they don't have in the theatrical release. So I think that's nice to have. They end up making out.
Right, sure.
And going all blue and having that whole conversation again about like if she's beautiful or not. He finally says that she is. He does say that like people will still think that she's not beautiful, but then she's like, okay, yeah, whatever. What do you think? And he's like, oh, yeah, I think you're beautiful.
He's so stupid.
But then she says, okay, well, what about yourself? And that's too much for him, and so he leaves.
Yeah.
During this, the whole reason that she came in here was to sneak into Cerebro
so that they can't find her anymore.
And break it,
yep.
Which I think is another fun scene to see because it's very reminiscent of the first
X-Men.
time when she breaks in to destroy Cerebro, and she has the whole thing where she's like does the eye and everything. Yeah. It's just that's a nice addition.
Yeah.
Character-wise.
I guess to be argumentative, with her stopping by the mansion, it seems like she's just ready. I don't know. It just seems like a stop from her ultimate destination one too many. But it
could be. I think that it definitely has that feel to a certain extent. I think the fact that he's been badgering her in her mind has kind of like pushed her to a point where she's like, I gotta take care of this, and then I'll do my thing. But I do think that the character development is enough that it makes up for any like awkwardness there.
Right. So now this is where there's a big difference, because in the theatrical version we just get a scene where Magneto breaks into a facility, steals his old helmet, sees a relic from like First Class. Perfect place to play the Frankenstein's monster music that they don't do. But in the Days of Future Past Rogue Cut, this is mixed with the break-in to get Rogue out.
Yes.
Of the mansion.
Which I like for multiple reasons.
Yeah, it's interestingly shot because like every time Magneto does something in the future or past, it's then mirrored. It's mirrored by the other one.
The other. Yeah, and I think it's really cool because first of all, I think it's really valuable to the movie to have an action plot sequence outside of direct relation to the past. Mm-hmm. I think having the future people actually doing something balances things out in a good way. I remember thinking when I first saw Days of Future Past that it felt too much like a frame story. Like we brought all these people in and it's just all it is a frame for what the actual plot is, which is in the past. And I didn't like that. Right. I like it having more of a sense of both of these things are happening at the same time, which also happens in the comic. The comic of Days of Future Past has a lot more of like things happening in both places than happens in the theatrical trailer. So I like giving them something to do, regardless of what that is. Right. I like that they have something to do. I also like having the mirroring of the Magnetos because it gives us a little bit of that we have with Xavier,
right?
Which is very direct.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to have a direct communication, but it still lets you look at the two sides of Magneto and think like how he's grown, how he's a different person in each of those situations. In the past, he's being a villain. In the future, he's going to rescue someone, which brings me to my third thing that I really like about this scene, which is the fact that he is coming in to rescue Rogue. Just it's a great end cap to his story because of how he started he kidnapped Rogue to use her. Now he is rescuing Rogue still to use her power, but for good and like with her consent. So I think I think it's really a beautiful completion to that arc. I think a lot of the stuff that I really like about the Rogue Cut specifically is that it works with the whole arc of the series rather than just its own movie.
Also, what changes is this is where in the movie Iceman dies in the future.
He does, and it's really cool.
Oh, geez, Hilary.
It is.
That's
well, he's
Iceman.
just so.
Yeah,
he's just so like.
He's just blown up by all
cool.
the heat blast.
Yeah, but he like puts up a fight. You know what I mean? Like he's like, I'm gonna take care of this, and he's like doing all the blasting and being cool. And he's got like there's three sentinels coming after him, and he does ice wall. Yeah. Like he's like really going for it. So he does die, and it's very dramatic. But
Magneto busts them out, and in the process, they end up breaking one of the pipelines, and the whole mansion explodes. Which is this like the first time the whole mansion has been destroyed on screen then?
I guess so, yeah.
So it's just absolutely destroyed. Xavier's home is destroyed. Iceman is killed. And a Sentinel is still attached to their ship, and Xavier has to do some fancy piloting. Which I guess is kind of cool too, because this is like the only action scene that Peace Stew has ever had in these movies.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like it's a nice realistic way for him to be able to actiony. He does a pretty good job. I think it's nice. And then in the Rogue cut, I don't know if it happens in the theatrical cut, but in the Rogue cut, there's an arm that stays attached.
It's only in the Rogue cut, because in the theatrical cut, we know they say like they always find us. So we're just supposed to assume that once again, the Sentinels have found them like they always do. But in the Rogue cut, they show that it was an arm that has like a tracking beacon.
Yeah.
That they end up following. Yeah, it's a cool scene with the whole mirroring. And with past Magneto, when he goes in and we see like Angel's wing and Havoc's old suit, they do a close-up on the coin from the first one that he killed Sebastian Shaw with. That whole scene then is what they have to edit other things around when they take it out, because Iceman has to still be there at the end of the movie in the theatrical version. Kitty Pryde still has to be there.
Yeah, because Rogue comes back and she takes over for Kitty.
Yep.
Now I can't remember if this happens a little later, but like when we actually see Rogue do the switch.
I think it's pretty soon afterwards, because the movie's starting to wind down.
She comes in, and this is another moment that I really like, because she comes in, she takes over for Kitty. It's a pretty smooth transition. It's fine. But then when she's like sort of settling in, she says, "Hello, Logan," and then like in the past he wakes up and says, "Rogue." And I just love it. Oh, yeah,
that Magneto noticed. That Wolverine noticed the switch.
Yeah, it's this acknowledgement of their relationship from the first movie, which is another, like, completing the arc kind of a situation. But it's so quick. It's just this brief little, it's not like, let's all, like, talk about it and, like, hug. It's just this brief little thing that just acknowledges and then moves on. And I just really like it.
And also, don't they have to, like, acknowledge that, tell Kitty that Iceman is gone in the Rogue cut? Cause,
they do, yeah. When Rogue shows up, and that's an interesting... That's another interesting thing, because it's Rogue who tells Kitty. And Rogue, we know, had a relationship with Bobby before. And so it's just an interesting, like, ex-girlfriend connecting with her girlfriend.
Does that mean just regular girlfriends in the X-Men universe?
Ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
Ex.
So former X-Men girlfriends.
Well, yes. In this case, yes.
On the plane, because now they're flying to Washington, Xavier and Wolverine have a talk, because Wolverine doesn't know how things are going to go when they get there. And he's basically just trying to appeal to Xavier to still form the X-Men, that they're going to need him to go find Storm and Jean and Scott, which is nice of Wolverine to throw Scott in there as well.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, you know what? You're going to meet a kid named Scott Summers. Don't worry about him. Just leave him.
Skip him. He's evil, so...
The X-Men that we know are in the future. Like, it's just a few people. It's just Beast, Xavier, and Wolverine in this that are really, like, the X-Men of the 70s. It is an X-Men movie, but, like, there is no real X-Men on screen. You know what I mean? And so...
Yeah, that's true.
In some ways, it itself, even though Matthew Vaughn was talking about this should be the third movie, that element kind of makes it feel like a middle chapter to me in some ways, in that the X-Men still
solidified into the team.
Right, there's still no X-Men. I would imagine, though, in his Days of Future Past, like he said, you would get to know his characters and his X-Men, that we would have a bigger team of mutants here in the 70s. Yeah. Like, we would have, like, a legitimate team of X-Men. I like Wolverine's line where Xavier's like, "I'll do my best." He's like, "Your best is enough." It's a nice line.
I really, really like that line.
Yeah, your best is enough.
Because so often you hear someone say, "I'll do my best," and the response is, "That's not good enough."
Right.
And it's just really striking, especially from such a cynical character, to have him say, "Your best is enough." Yeah. It's just so, like, encouraging and emotional. I just love it.
They get to the White House presentation of the Sentinels. Wolverine goes through a metal detector and he's fine. That's another metal detector joke. The series also loves metal detector jokes. Is this
They
our
do.
third or fourth? I'm losing track here.
I don't know what it is about adamantium, but I cannot get my head to believe that it's magnetic. I can't.
No, I don't think
Every
it's
time
yeah.
Magneto uses his power on him and like things with the metal detectors and all that stuff, it just feels wrong. It feels like it shouldn't be conductive. I don't know why. I have no idea. It's just this intrinsic thing in my head.
Let's see.
I don't know.
And then we see the retro Sentinels. So we've seen the future Sentinels. Let's talk about the Sentinel designs.
The Sentinels in the future are so cool.
You think they're cool? Okay, because they've got that like scaly form. Because they're supposed to look like robot versions of Mystique. Yeah,
I think they're really cool. They look a lot like that guy from Thor.
Oh, yeah.
The giant thing in Thor.
The
like blasts
armor.
out of his face.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that.
And because like the energy blasts out of their face, they even look like that robot from like the day the Earth stood still.
Yep.
A bit. And I like them. I like the future Sentinels. But there is still a part of me...
You just want them to be more like the real Sentinels?
The big, giant purple Sentinels from, like, the cartoon and stuff. I guess because, like, yeah, I do. But at the same time, I get why they would do it the way they did it. But there is a part of me that just wants the big, giant purple Sentinels who are like, mutant detected.
Yeah.
But we got the animated series for that, at least.
It.
But the retro design that we have in the 70s kind of have that, like, purple big design. The 70s retro Sentinels... They're still not quite there in terms of like what I want from like a big old Sentinel design, but on their own as just like a robot design, I think it's cool by themselves. Like
I think they're reminiscent enough.
Yeah, no, they are.
Purple.
But I think if they weren't Sentinels, if they were just like robot designs, I would still be like, oh, I like that design. They have this like cool, like even in the 70s, they still seem like they were built for the 50s.
Yeah, I can see that.
They got like that Harrier jet kind of lift off in that purple design. Yeah. Having a 20-story tall giant Sentinel is probably not feasible. But I'm glad you like the future Sentinels. I do too.
They're so cool. I like how, I don't know, I mean, if you're thinking about them as, are they good as Sentinels? I can see,
Yeah.
You want them to have the different design, but just as like villains that are infiltrating everywhere they go, I think they're great. I mean, the adaptability is really cool. The way that they move is really like crawly and like creepy and stuff, and they just get in everywhere. I like it.
Magneto does his big thing lift, where he lifts a very big thing in the movie.
He left a big thing.
So where are we with the big things he lifted? Golden Gate Bridge.
He lifted the bridge.
Submarine.
He lifted, the submarine.
And now he's lifting the stadium.
Is this the biggest thing? Would you say a stadium is bigger than the Golden Gate Bridge?
I don't know. It seems like a Golden Gate Bridge is pretty big, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
And the weight distribution would be different.
Seems like a bridge probably has more metal. Like the ratio of the metal is probably higher than in the stadium. So maybe that's easier for him to lift because he's controlling more of the mass.
Right. More hot dog stands in the stadium than in the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes.
Sorry. Because you had to take a second to be like, does that actually apply?
The concrete in the stadium.
You know, the stadium is just a giant metaphor for him, though.
Yeah, I still don't fully understand why he brought the stadium, because it seems like his main thing is having infiltrated the Sentinels. Is it just for impact, I guess? I mean, he points the cameras and stuff, so he must just be going for impact.
It traps everybody in there. I mean, that's how I've always kind of thought of it since I've seen the movie, that the stadium is just, he's just trapped everyone in there. But on this one, I'm like, also, Magneto just wants a stage. He wants to do everything on a stage, and so he needs his own stadium, you know?
Brought it.
Yeah. I like the Sentinels are the bad guy, but also Magneto's the bad guy.
Right.
And so but you have the Sentinels attacking the X-Men in the future, but Magneto doing the thing that people like seeing him do in the comics, where he takes control of the Sentinels in the past. And so you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too, in that the Sentinels are a big threat to the X-Men, while also Magneto turns the tides with the Sentinels.
Right, yeah. But then he also has the Sentinels attack
mutants, Beast and Wolverine, He uses his power to take rail and put metal in them, but it also seems like he's trying to mess with the circuitry. And
he's got to be. It's another one of those things, like how he messes with Cerebro.
Yeah.
Like he's also like an intricate programmer.
Yeah, I don't know how you're that good with your metal control powers that you're like, yes, now I'll flip A to switch B.
On, off,
yeah.
on, off.
Yeah. He's given his whole speech and everything about mutant kind. Now we're cutting back to the future a lot more often. The Sentinels show up. Storm blows up a bunch of ships by crashing them into each other, and Magneto throws their jet, which has a reactor core that explodes in there. Bishop is all charged up.
That Storm causes to explode. We got a lot more teamwork going on with these guys.
Yeah, Magneto sends it and opens it up and gets things ready, and then she hits it with the lightning, and everything just blows up. A Sentinel pops out from behind the wall and stabs Storm and sends her to her death.
Yes, that is a takeout straight from the comic. Yeah,
her getting stabbed.
A Sentinel like shoots along, maybe a harpoon, something like that like stabs through her, and it's the same kind of like shot where it's very dramatic.
And then Bishop dies pretty quickly after, with them giving him too much energy to absorb, and he blows up.
Yeah, we've talked about this with that adaptability guy
with
in
Darwin,
First Class.
Yeah, it's like
I never fully buy that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, well, he would just use his power and then blow up those Sentinels. He wouldn't just stand there and be like,
why does he
never...
Why does he never extend, shoot out the power?
It's one of those things where you just have a character who's cool, and the writers just aren't interested in them because they're only interested in these three characters, Magneto, Xavier, and Wolverine. Those are the three characters they like. And if your name is Bishop or Havoc or Storm, then tough luck.
But at the same time, it's good to have sort of an extended parallel to the kinds of things that small group was doing at the very beginning of the movie.
Yes.
Where everybody dies.
Yes.
But then it doesn't matter.
Right. And now everybody's dead, and it does matter. Because either they're going to do this and they're going to be fixed, or they're going to fail and these people are dead anyway. This is it. This is their last stand.
It's their last stand.
Colossus also dies pretty quick, gets torn in half.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Brutal.
That was awful. It's like they think because he's metal, we won't think that that's awful, but it is awful.
The stuff in the past, just everything in the future happening, and the way the music is, and Magneto doing everything that he's doing in the past and pulling it's just it's tense. Even though I know how everything's gonna go, every time I rewatch this final act still feels very tense, and you're just like, come on, it's stressful because
it's very stressful.
Magneto's screwing everything up.
Yeah, they had a plan, and it just...
Wolverine fights kind of a Sentinel in the past, and it's just, this is one of those things where I get upset because it's like, I want to see Wolverine. And this Wolverine, fight a Sentinel, but because he's in the past and he's only got his bone claws, it's nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, well, obviously we want to see Wolverine fight a Sentinel. You put Wolverine and Sentinels in the same movie, and I don't know, I just wanted to see one scene where he takes on a Sentinel. And I will say that by having him be the one in the past, we lose the super iconic death of Wolverine in the future, where in the Days of Future Past comic, where he's doing the fastball special and the Sentinel just evaporates him. He's just gone, and it's just a skeleton, and he's never coming back. It's such a iconic scene in the comics that by having him in the past, you can't do that. And I think it would have been pretty shocking had he stayed in the future to have seen that. It's just too bad we didn't get it. A comic story that they kind of allude to is when he goes after Magneto. Magneto hits him with that concrete block, which I know we see Wolverine get knocked around and cut up and all this stuff all the time, but something about that concrete block going into him is just like, jeez. And then he puts all those metal bars through him. Through
his body.
And that's
kind of well, you're probably just going to say this, that harkens back to his Weapon X getting instilled with metal.
Also kind of looks like in the comics when Magneto tore Wolverine's metal out of him, the effect that the adamantium had, liquefying out of him, kind of looks how the bars are placed on him. So I wonder if that was an allusion to, but I never thought about that. It's metal going back into Wolverine.
Right, he's cramming metal back in there.
God, this is just a bad time for, and then he just says so much for being a survivor and tosses him into the bay.
And this Magneto has no idea how impactful that is. He doesn't care about Wolverine. This is not a person that he knows.
Oh my gosh.
So for Wolverine, this is a big thing. He's facing off against Magneto, and Magneto's, but it's nothing to him. He's just an obstacle.
And then after this, everybody's dead. Warpath gets dragged into a blast face first. Sunspot gets his arm cut off and then killed. Blink is also murdered by like 4 of them, right?
Yeah,
four of them just
too.
surround. She's just stabbed because there's too many to portal. Yeah, it's this one where one turns into diamonds against Sunspot, and then the one that has like the Lady Deathstrike claws kills him. They're just tearing through him. Now, Magneto, when he blew up the plane, he also got a piece of metal jabbed into him. And so Blink opens up a portal for him to get back in there after he makes up a metal wall. They're cutting through that. Everybody's dying.
I think in the I'm not sure, but I think in the Rogue cut, it's Kitty brings him through.
Yeah, you know what? I do remember that happening. She leans through because she's not doing the time travel stuff now. So yeah, in the theatrical cut, Iceman is still in there with Kitty and Xavier. Mystique is hiding out there. She's still planning to kill Trask. Magneto's pulled up their bunker. Everything's going wrong. He's giving his big speech. Mystique tries to pretend to be the president and get him not to kill everybody else, just him. What happens is Beast, who's in his blue form, takes his own serum, takes like 4 of them. He does not care about ODing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He takes 4 of them so that he'll transform back into his human self.
Because I guess it suppresses the gene.
Yeah, and so the Sentinel no longer sees him as a mutant and now goes after Magneto. Magneto just tears him apart, but in the process, Mystique shoots him in the neck. And he says...
It's a close-up effect.
Yeah, it's gross. I didn't watch it this time.
Well, that's another slow-mo, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gross. I don't want to see it. And he's like, you should have been a better shot. She's like, don't worry. It just kicks the crap out of him. Almost like the sound effects and the impact almost seems like they maybe thought she would like kill him in this process. Like snap his neck. But no, he's fine. Well,
I think the implication from what she says, I think, is that she intended to leave him alive.
And she gets the gun ready to shoot, and Xavier shows up, and he gives this big speech about how you have to choose, which I think is kind of funny because all the cameras are still pointing on Mystique, so nobody sees the Xavier thing.
Right, so she's just standing there.
Right, just standing there having a conversation out loud to no one. She's like, get out of my head! And people are like,
this is the conversation that I love because it completes their arc.
Yeah.
He specifically says, I have been trying to control you since the day we met.
Yep.
And I'm not going to do that anymore. Every choice you make now is your choice. Yeah. And it's just such a clean
He learned.
cut.
He learned to respect women.
Yes, I love it. And so and then of course that is the moment where she doesn't have to fight against him anymore.
But during
so she does make her own choice.
Yeah.
Well, it just sort of seems like all of the bad things that she does is in some way a reaction against him. Like she knows that he's trying to make her be good, and so she's not going to.
Right.
So when she finally has the chance to really make her own choice without fearing that she's like gonna somehow acquiesce to his will, then that makes it so she can finally make her own choice, and that choice is going to be the right one.
But she's still kind of thinking it through with her gun pointing at them, and then
right.
And we're cutting back to the future, and Iceman is being killed again. In the theatrical cut, he gets killed because I think they use the same shot though that you see in the Rogue cut there because his death is the same. And Magneto says that speech, all those years wasted fighting to have a precious few of them back, and they shake hands because they're friends. And
they're friends.
They're all looking as Wolverine's like drowning, and Xavier's like no, and the Sentinels are coming in, and that's just F-U piano. That stupid piano that comes in and is just so... Listen, all right, I teared up. I teared up during this scene. I tear up every time during this scene because of that piano. It just gets me on every level with all of that, and with the X-Men in the future. It's just too much. I can get through watching them all get killed in these oh, look how dramatic it is. But it was once that piano comes in and everything's just like up there, it's like, make the right decision.
Yeah.
And you just see Xavier seeing the Sentinel. I can't. Anyway, this is at this point, I mean, how many movies have I said I cry at? This and sometimes at X-Men 2. So we're good. I'm done crying at X-Men movies until Logan.
No more crying.
But hold on, because when Logan
anger?
comes, I'm gonna be crying on the podcast. No,
that's probably true.
But yeah, that it's that piano that plays in there. It's just too much. That whole scene, it just grabs my heart and squeezes.
And that's the scene where they're flashing back and forth
because Mystique
the deciding factor is going to be Mystique.
Yeah, Mystique is deciding
whether to kill.
Wolverine is drowning. The Sentinels are about to kill Kitty Pryde and Wolverine and Xavier. It's all coming to a head, and then she chooses not to shoot.
Yep. She chooses not to shoot.
And it's
and then
such
we have
a dang relief.
It is. But we have that similar shot as we had early on when the Sentinels finally get through. They're about to kill.
Mm-hmm. And everything disappears.
Everyone.
And the whole place is
and then
empty.
everything disappears.
Thank goodness.
So they've made the change.
Cut back to the 70s. Magneto's up, but he doesn't have his helmet. He says, like, if you give me to them, I'm a dead man. And Xavier's like, I know, and lets him go. So it's like, bye. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Seems like maybe he should pay for his crimes.
Yeah, I guess I understand.
Yeah, we're going to see this happen again, too, in Apocalypse, where it's like, bye, Magneto. Thanks for almost killing people.
They've just reconciled, sort of,
Yeah.
And he doesn't, I think the wounds of humans trying to kill them are still fresh enough that he's like, I'm not going to hand you over to them.
Right. Yeah. So Magneto flies away, and Xavier, he says, I can't remember, it's him and Beast are having a conversation. Basically, Raven is going to leave now. Mystique is going to go. Now we're done. We cut back to the future, but now it's all better. Wolverine wakes up in his future body. However, there is a very sad element to this, in that there is a Wolverine who lived his entire life from birth until 2000 whatever as himself. And then this morning he woke and he was gone. And there was a new Wolverine in that head.
Well, no, because they said he was going to remember.
He's going to remember, but this Wolverine has still lived his entire life. Because
you mean the Wolverine that he's replacing.
Right, the Wolverine in the future. Because Xavier's like, don't you have a school to teach? So there has been a Wolverine living his life.
That's true.
Knowing these X-Men who's now gone forever.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest, because this is something that has happened in other stories of this ilk, that the initial him coming back into this body, he completely doesn't have that life, but that over time they will sort of like combine so that he has both sets of memories.
Okay, maybe. Luckily, we never have to deal with that. We don't have to like see the next movie where because really, when like the X-Men are interacting with them, they're interacting with a Wolverine they've never met.
Yeah,
that's
true.
The thing. Everything's changed. For a while, you could be like, well, all this stuff is still going to lead to the first 3 X-Men movies, but because of Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, we know that it doesn't really. It's just
different.
Yeah, it's been a different story.
But he sees Rogue and Bobby. They're nice and happy.
So if you watch the theatrical cut like I did, this is the only scene with Rogue. Just a dialogueless smile at Wolverine.
That's a shame.
She takes Bobby's hands and walks away.
You also see
Kelsey Grammer. He walks in.
Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah, late start. It's just one of those like, you know what? We have Kelsey Grammer. Apparently, I've read things where he's gone about his career, and he liked playing Beast. He liked the character.
Yeah, well, it fits.
And
it's a good fit.
I like him as Beast as opposed to Nicholas Hoult. But
he's definitely he's the more traditional Beast.
Listen, Hoult. If Frasier can sit through how many hours of makeup that is and be fine, you can do it for a movie or two. Because your face, your normal white bread face, is nothing to not cover up with blue makeup. Okay, Nicholas Hoult?
Leave the poor boy alone.
No, I'm playing a leading man? Screw him. Anyway.
Oh, my word.
So Bobby and Rogue are back together.
Yep.
But when Wolverine is passing through the classrooms, Kitty's teaching a class. And who's in that classroom with her? Colossus. From the comics. Because they love each other in the comics.
Kissy.
And Storm is also there. She also doesn't really get... Storm really gets, like, shorted. Out of all the trilogy people, she's definitely the one. Because she survived for 3 movies.
Having a baby at the time.
Yeah, I guess. And
that would be interesting if they showed her and she was pregnant in the future.
Well, I kind of thought about that. In the future, why not just have pregnant Halle Berry as Storm? Fun. And then you're left to wonder, like, and then maybe Wolverine... Because Wolverine has that line where they're like, do you have a kid here? He's like, I hope not. It'd be like... Then we'd all be like, oh, was that Wolverine's baby?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Then we see a lady in red. Who is it? It's Jean Grey. She's back to life after Last Stand.
The most redheaded person I have ever seen.
Here's the thing.
Is it like more intense than in the other movies?
If you're as redheaded as she is in this movie, do you wear all red like she is in this scene?
No, you don't.
Because like I thought about that. I'm like, she just wakes up and like, you know what? I have red hair. I will wear only red.
Yeah, she's like incandescent in this scene. It's like it's like she's radioactive or something.
Yeah, it's probably to It's probably intentional. I would hope it's intentional, not that they just were like, no, this is a fine red. Like, she's still flirting with Logan.
Yeah.
In this future, with her husband in the room. So in some ways, yeah, Wolverine is like going to touch her face, and Cyclops is like, whoa! And we're like, yay, Cyclops is alive too! It's kind of funny because Wolverine's like, nothing ever changes. I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of Jean.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
But then I like that he's happy to see Scott too. Like,
I know, and Scott's
he puts
just
his hand on his shoulders, and then he's like, okay.
Yeah, that okay from Scott is very funny. And those goggles are pretty dorky.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess because it's supposed to be
the
like
future.
In the future from where we've seen them
in the future,
before.
our glasses will be ski goggles.
Yes, that is my expectation.
Yeah. I like Logan's reaction when Xavier's like, don't you have a class to teach? And he's like, class to teach? Just like, what kind of hell is this? I thought we stopped this. And he says, history, I need some catching up. And that's when Xavier's like, oh, welcome back, my old friend. That other Wolverine sucked for this past 50 years.
This is an interesting part, because every other time that I have seen this movie, I have thought that he, in that moment, was like going into Wolverine's memory and like realizing what had happened. This time was the only time that it clicked with me that he just remembered from when it happened in the 70s. The very first time that ever clicked for me.
So he says, what's the last thing you remember? And he talks about drowning. And we see the scene of him being picked up. Is it Mystique who's giving the dialogue? Yes.
Oh boy, I don't remember.
Anyway, he's being picked up and the bars fall off and Stryker's there. And I have to back away from the microphone because I'm going to get a little loud. And Stryker's there and they're like, what do we do with him? He's like, I'll take it from here. And he turns from the camera. And so this was actually the original ending. And there's a commentary where Bryan Singer's just like, what a piece of crap ending this would be. Without, like, anything. Just Stryker looking out to the sea. So they added in the yellowing for the Mystique eyes.
Okay, see, I think that's a worse ending. I think it is much cooler if it is Stryker, because then it's like, what happened? How did he get out of that situation? Well, how he got out of it was getting into the problem that he had the first time.
I guess for me, so like, this is one of those endings where I was just like, oh, that's so cool. What's the next? Because now I'm thinking we're going to see the next movie that's either in the 70s or in the 80s, and Mystique and Wolverine are going to have this weird history together where she, like, rescued him from this, and now they're, like, teamed up. And no, if this is just another one of those stupid, unfulfilled cliffhangers that this series does over and over, whether it's the Jean Grey Phoenix thing, which I guess was fulfilled in Last Stand, but not really. If it's the Wolverine with Yuriko, where they're like gonna be partners now. If it's Apocalypse, where you think they're gonna be wearing these X-Men costumes, it's just, I'm so fed up.
Get your hands off your face.
How'd you know they were on my face?
Because you're all muffled.
It was because 3 movies on this hot streak, and after this, and I love this, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let myself trust again, and they did it again every time.
Trust.
Because
never.
It's just so. Because
that's funny, because it never for a second occurred to me that would ever come back.
I guess it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, that's a cool concept. I'd like to see this cliffhanger like played out. Like, what a different way to, maybe Wolverine isn't going to get captured. Maybe he's going to get his, I mean, you're doing Apocalypse. Maybe Apocalypse is going to be the one who gives him his medal. No, because in Apocalypse, it's just he ends up getting captured again anyway. Yeah. And that means either Mystique let him go or she made sure he was still there. And it's just, it would have been... Anyway, I've said my piece. I thought there was potential there, and there was none. And you know what? They can't even blame it on change of director, because it's freaking Singer again.
Yeah, well, that's just like, that's a really cheap idea to me. Like, I feel like he just saw that ending and was like, let's make it cooler, let's make it Mystique. But he didn't think about any of those things that you just said.
Right, he just thought it'd be a cool cliffhanger, yeah. But, like, the potential...
There was never any intention to fulfill anything with that.
It just would have been to go cut to the 80s, where, like, Mystique and Wolverine are now, like, this duo doing...
Why would you remind me of him and Yuriko? Because I want to see that so
I know! I love the X-Men, and I've said before, I love the X-Men movies, and I tend to be forgiving of the bad movies, but these stinking cliffhangers, they just tear my heart out. That was it. As I said, it's not the original. If they had stuck with the original with it really is Stryker, I wouldn't have made that the end of the movie. I would have found a better note. I would have had that like cut back.
Was that the last scene?
It's the last scene of this movie. Yeah, with Stryker looking off. I would have...
yeah, there definitely should have been something after.
You would have think it would have cut to Xavier and then cut back to Wolverine being taken out and it's Stryker, and then you cut back to the future.
Yeah.
Did you watch the end credits?
Yeah, that's true.
Did you watch the end credits this time? Do you care?
I did. It seemed kind of pointless.
Yeah, it is pointless, right? It's just young Apocalypse, his powers or whatever. Doesn't matter. I mean, I was excited because I was like, cool, we're going to see Apocalypse. But then when I saw this scene and you just see him... Yeah, I guess
I sort of thought that they were going to make him be Apocalypse. Yeah. Was my main assumption.
But as soon as he's just telekinetically moving things around, building the pyramids, I was like, oh no, it's not going to be Apocalypse as he should be. It's a quick turnaround too, because normally the X-Men have a good, like, you know, it's 2000 to 2003. With this one, it's 2014 to 2016. This is where they start cranking them out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was only a year between the Wolverine and Days of Future Past. Anyway, yeah, the Apocalypse thing at the end is definitely not very exciting, with or without the movie Apocalypse. Not like the Magneto Xavier recruiting Wolverine from the Wolverine. That was like, oh man.
Fulfilled in some way, sort of.
Almost. Yeah, that was fulfilled. It was just this weird timeline that we don't fully understand.
Right.
And the metal claws being back there. I mean, that's the movie then. Hilary, what are our thoughts on the X-Men Days of Future Past movie?
Man, we've gone this long and we still haven't gotten to our thoughts.
Well, in some ways. In some ways we have.
Yeah, we have. Well, I can recap my thoughts.
Please do.
I love this movie. I definitely prefer the Rogue cut.
Mm-hmm.
I know that people say that, like, they like the content, but, well, actually, we got that Twitter...
Yeah, I was going to read it when I say my thoughts.
Well, it refers to mine, too, so what are you doing now?
Our thoughts, before we get to... On Twitter, we asked what people thought of this movie. Aaron Sinner said, among my favorite, it packs in a lot, but I like the speed at which it moves. That's my big knock on the Rogue cut. The content is good enough, but not at the expense of what it does to the pacing of this film. Aaron Sinner, are you my brother?
Yeah, see, I've heard this argument a lot, and I definitely understand it,
mm-hmm.
but I'll tell you why I still prefer the Rogue cut. I think when you watch the theatrical cut, it presents as a different kind of movie than the Rogue cut. So if you try to watch the Rogue cut as the same kind of movie, then definitely it has that pacing problem.
Right.
So it's not the hard-hitting action movie. It's not like this. It's definitely not. And if that's what you're expecting, you'll think the pacing is wrong. But I remember thinking that when I first saw it, thinking like I really liked the content, but the pacing wasn't as good because I had watched it pretty much right after seeing the theatrical version. Watching it last night, when I haven't seen either of them in years, I just enjoyed it as a movie. Like, I thought that there was never a moment when I was like, okay, pick it up or anything. I thought that it was cut together really well. I think it feels just more like a more thoughtful movie and less of an action movie. So I think if you're watching it in that mindset, you don't get those pacing problems. And I think that the value that it brings as an end cap to, and like, I know that they keep going, but whatever. I still think of it as X-Men to Days of Future Past as an arc. And I think when you watch it as the Rogue cut, it just has so many very deliberate parallels and conclusions to arcs and everything that I really, really appreciate as a fan of the entire franchise. Right. I think it works really, really well.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do keep going, but because the original cast never comes back after this outside of Logan, I mean, it really is like the end cap of like the X-Men trilogy. It's like, it gives us the closure that Last Stand didn't really give us.
Right, exactly. I think it's really good. I really like having the two casts together. I think that could be done in a way that is kind of cheesy or like trying to lean on sort of gimmicks.
Right.
But I think that it's really, really good. I think the strength of the actors does a lot for that. I think that what I saw was the Rogue cut. So the Rogue cut, I think, particularly does a really good job of balancing that and having the fuller plot in the future timeline adds a lot to that too, to the balance of those two casts.
So the theatrical, I love it. I love this movie. This is one of the, for me, like, it's X2, X-Men First Class, and Days of Future Past are like, they're all just so good. I don't care which of these three films people say is their favorites. It's when one of those three aren't their favorites that I'm like, really? You like,
what's your problem?
Yeah, you like, I can't even pick one. But yeah, these three, I mean, those three, they just seem like they're just so good. But Days of Future Past, because X-Men 2 has a lot going on, it feels very much like a franchise step. Like we want to get to the third movie in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And because First Class, it doesn't have a lot of like the characters that you think of when you think of X-Men. With this movie, it feels like, in a lot of ways, it feels like almost weirdly a standalone film more than the other ones to me sometimes, because it's less about building the steps for the sequel. Everything is so well done in this. It really just seemed like everybody knew they had to get this movie right, and so they did.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's things like there's moments or jokes that don't think work so well, but as a movie by itself, I think it's just great. And I think it was something in the air maybe in 2014 where you get Winter Soldier and this and Guardians of the Galaxy where people are like, let's just do the best dang thing we can do. Yeah, for me, it's very much like connecting with the rest of the X-Men movies. It feels like this fulfillment or something, and I put a lot of emotion onto the end scenes and whatnot. And it is so good to see the original cast back, and I wish we could have seen more, and I wish, we'll talk about it when we get to Apocalypse, but I wish they had gone the opposite direction with another movie after this. Wish they had seen that financially would have been better. There's things about it, as a movie by itself, I think it's great. And there's things about it that it changes from the comics, and there's stuff from the comics I would have liked to see. It would have been cool to see Rachel. It would have been cool to have Kitty or Bishop be the one to go back, because it'd be so different. Because these movies, this series tends to just focus on those three characters, and it tends to be so, for a team that's supposed to be about minorities and people different than the reader or the viewer, it really just focuses on these three old white guys most of the time.
True.
And so if you had Kitty Pryde or you have had Bishop be the one in the past getting things moving, it would have been, the characters who aren't our three old white guys are all regulated to the future scene, and they're wiped out twice. And so that gets frustrating to have like characters who look so cool and have cool powers and represent a greater population than myself.
This is sounding a little too familiar.
It would have been sweet, but for what it is, it's just the story, the pacing, it's so good. And I mean, that's why I agree with Aaron that like, I like what the Rogue cut adds. I like seeing Rogue again. And I think that kind of mirroring of the Magnetos is cool. I think if I was in charge of like the Rogue cut, I would have just left in the Rogue rescue scene and probably kept a lot of the deleted scenes deleted, because a lot of them are just extensions of scenes that are already there. I would have cut out that. I know you like the Beast with the Beast and Mystique scene, but that never would have gone into it. But
I think that's just super important for her arc.
Yeah.
Like I think if you try to think of it just as its own movie and you're just going to be like making the pacing exactly the way you want, then I guess I can understand that. But if you think about what serves the characters, I think that's necessary, and right. I don't think it takes away enough to warrant getting rid of it.
It's like what you said how before in this movie with the Rogue cut that it's because of its extension, it's a better movie for like the whole series in a lot of ways.
Right.
But I think as a standalone movie by itself, when I've seen both versions, to me the pacing does kind of start to slow down, and I think like Aaron Sinner said here, it's kind of impressive how much they get in for the 2-hour theatrical cut. It's just kind of like there's a lot going on there. I mean, they put a lot in there and they kept it moving and they kept it tense, and it's kind of shocking. I still ended up watching because you can switch pretty quickly between them on the Blu-ray. So I ended up watching the Rogue rescue scene too, because it does suck that like they got Anna Paquin to play Rogue and have an interaction with Logan, and they just cut that all out, and then she's just a cameo. It just kind of like when you watch Rogue in the movies go from like being a main character, and you can just see the track as she gets less and less lines to the point where she's just a speechless cameo. It gets so frustrating.
Yeah, well, I think they underestimate how important she is. Like they just laid her groundwork too heavily in the first movie to just not wrap her up in any way.
This is one of those things again where like the X-Men movies kind of did it first by having like this big superhero movie with all this time travel and then also bringing together these two eras of characters. It's like a brilliant combination of like, oh, we've got all these characters people like and we've got these new characters. We can do this actually.
Yeah.
And you know what? With the X-Men now no longer with Fox or with Disney owning Fox, I wouldn't be surprised if someday the MCU does do Days of Future Past. And I imagine that if the Days of Future Past was done in the MCU, I imagine it would be more comic accurate. And I imagine it would be in some ways cooler. But I don't know if they could make it better.
Well, yeah, what they'll end up missing, because I think you're right. I mean, they're already talking about bringing them into the MCU, so that's the coolest version of them, so I'm sure they'll do it. But what they'll be missing is that external, like, kind of meta groundwork that they did.
That we had 14 years of the X-Men.
Right. Like, we love these version, we love this version, and now they're combined. They'll just not be able to have that.
And I you know, if they end up doing it and they do make a better version of it, cool. But I think what happens is even if they make an amazing, like a perfect Days of Future Past movie with the MCU, this movie is still going to be as good as it is now because of this series. You know, just because Star Trek Beyond is good doesn't mean Wrath of Khan is bad. So
that's a decent analogy.
Thanks. So if they do, I look forward to seeing like the comic accurate Sentinels. I look forward to seeing Nightcrawler in his comic accurate costume and maybe the Wolverine death scene and maybe more Kitty and Bishop and all that stuff. For now, as just a standalone without what movies are to come after this, it's good. It's good stuff. It's one of the best. And it makes me cry. I cry.
I don't think I cried.
Yeah, I don't. You know what? Me saying I cried doesn't necessarily mean a movie's that good. All right, that was Days of Future Past. You know, the next movie we're talking about, Hilary, is...
Don't tell me.
No, it's not that one. It's Deadpool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Actually, they had a 4-film streak. It's after Deadpool comes Apocalypse.
Ugh.
Hey.
Okay, so Deadpool's next. I have seen Deadpool once.
Right. Yes. Yeah, Deadpool will be interesting because, like, we don't really talk about comedies.
That's true.
How do we do this with a comedy? I guess
I don't know.
It will probably be our shortest. Hopefully, it will be our shortest.
Probably we'll be like, wasn't it funny when he did this?
Yeah, it was funny when he said, "Look at my balls," and we all did. But yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Still, do not watch Deadpool 2 until we get to it because Deadpool 2 is funnier, but also I feel like it's more of an X-Men film in some ways.
Okay.
The next podcast is the animated series again.
Eat.
Yeah. So I've been Eric Mickles. I am Dust vs. Tweak everywhere online. Apart from other shows on the Radio Meanwhile Network. I'm the co-host of the podcast, The All the Book Show. Hilary's been my co-host.
That's me. I am nowhere else online.
Yeah, she just does this podcast. We've got an exclusive contract with her for at least another 2 years. So
non-compete.
Well, we had to. It was getting intense. Plus, then you can ask for a raise. Yeah, and we didn't want to have to give you your raise when it came time to it. Thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Join us for our next episode as we watch and discuss the next episode of the 90s animated series, Get This, Days of Future Past.
What?
Yep, we're going to be talking about the part 1 and part 2 of the Days of Future Past episodes of the 90s cartoon, which will have Bishop in the lead.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. And then
that'll be cool.
After those two, we've just got the season finale for season 1.
Of the animated series?
For the animated series. And then we'll be done with season 1.
Wrapping that up.
Yeah. That last episode will be a standalone because we'll probably just talk a lot about that because that episode has a lot going on. And then we'll probably just talk about season 1 in general. We got a character spotlight coming up soon.
To pick a character?
I've been reading Rogue comics.
So Rogue it is.
Maybe. No promises, I guess.
Yes. A character spotlight is forthcoming.
It's forthcoming. So, join us for the next episode when we talk Days of Future Past again. It's our Days of Future podcasting. All right.
That was okay.
Okay. All right.
That was just okay.
We got a regular Simon Kinberg over here.
I don't know who that is.
He wrote the screenplay for X-Men Days of Future Past. We talked a whole bunch about him at the beginning of this podcast. All right. Again, you can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Previously on X, and please rate, subscribe, and share the show on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Hilary, this is 3.5 hours long.
What is wrong with us? We are long-winded.
Just with the movies.
Okay, so I've just been sitting back here, and my poor husband is like, where's my wife?
He gets it.
Just
he gets
left
it.
him alone.
All right.
That's true. He does podcasts.
It's a movie podcast.
He has never done a 3-hour podcast.
Hasn't he? Hasn't he?
I don't think so.
Oh, all right. Well, again, it's been it's a 3.5. I'll cut it down. But the movie ones always go long. If we talk 3.5 hours about Deadpool, you and I will need to get a third party on here to shut us down, because that would be ridiculous.
That's too much. That is too much.
Bye, everybody.
Well, we're still okay.
Oh,
bye.
Or say bye or not. I guess we are still recording.
I didn't know if we were. I thought we were just talking now.
All right.